Nathan watched as the dream tapir slipped away, and across the clearing, Danzo's shoulders eased for the first time. He couldn't let his prized summon be destroyed by Nathan's hand. After all, even a summoned creature was a tool, and a useful tool was worth protecting. Danzo needed the tapir's power if he hoped to take down Nathan next, so without hesitation, he struck. From the shadows, he flicked his wrist, sending a volley of kunai arcing toward Nathan. Even in his haste, Danzo had wrapped each blade's handle in a small explosive tag, just enough to catch Nathan off guard, he'd calculated. But Nathan was ready. His Byakugan flared, revealing every concealed threat, and he twisted his gaze with the Mangekyo Sharingan, pinpointing the deadly charges. In a fluid series of steps and sidesteps, he slipped the kunai aside one by one, leaving Danzo's ambush a smoking disappointment. None of the bombs could catch him. At that moment, the nightmare tapir shook off its stupor. It took in the chaos on the field and charged toward Danzo, hoping to regroup and overwhelm Nathan together. But Nathan wouldn't let them unite so easily. Although his earlier misstep had given his opponents a fleeting opening, his Heaven's Guard technique had more than compensated. Now was the time to press his advantage. Boom! 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 Kunai armed with explosive tags streaked through the air and detonated in rapid succession, each blast drowning out the last and sending shockwaves rippling outward. Nathan paid them no heed. With barely a shimmer of motion, he activated instant body technique, vanishing from sight and reappearing at the nightmare tapir's flank in the blink of an eye. Before the beast could recover, Nathan formed a precise hand seal and unleashed his jutsu, fire style, Crimson Blaze. A searing orb of flame sprang into being and slammed into the creature's neck, igniting a tuft of its coarse hair in a flash of orange fire. The battle, it seemed, was only just beginning. Nathan channeled even more chakra into his technique, causing the fireball to swell violently until it completely engulfed the dream tapir. No wonder he'd gone to such lengths. As a summoned beast, the tapir's senses far outmatched a human's. Unleashing that much chakra in one go would have created an enormous flame, but it would also have warned the target. If the tapir had leapt back in time, all his effort would have been wasted. By splitting the jutsu into two stages, Nathan achieved a subtler effect. The initial burst of energy, or rather the illusion of it, didn't alarm the dream tapir. It noticed something, but couldn't be sure of Nathan's intentions, so it stood its ground. Then, in an instant, the fireball erupted to full size, catching the creature completely off guard. Raging flames licked at its fur, engulfing most of its body in a searing blaze. A pained roar tore from the tapir's throat. It needed an escape strategy, fast. Quick as thought, it lunged toward the nearest pond. After all, a cat-like beast such as the dream tapir detests water. Nathan forced himself to look, pushing aside every instinct to look away. In that instant, his Byakugan activated, the pale irises at his temples flaring as he locked onto the dream tapir's position with unerring clarity. The creature broke the surface of the pool, and Nathan vanished in a blur, reappearing at its side. He raised a hand and formed the seals for Suitan, water array wall. In an instant, a towering barrier of churning water materialized beside him. From the opposite bank, Danzo seized his chance. His lungs drew in a breath of chakra, and he unleashed a series of razor-sharp air bullets. They struck the water wall, slicing into it and roiling it into whirlpools, but they couldn't break through. Not to be outdone, Danzo followed up with Futon, vacuum jade, sending a barrage of concentrated air blades toward Nathan's flank. Still, without the dream tapir's chakra blessing fueling the technique, the wind-style assault collapsed against the reinforced water barrier. Nathan spared Danzo a single dismissive glance, before turning his full attention to the dream tapir, which now stood on a rocky ledge just ahead. Its pale eyes met his across the slippery stone, issuing a silent challenge. Nathan steadied himself, ready for whatever came next. At that moment, Nathan unleashed the illusion Sharingan he had painstakingly honed. Perfected through countless trials and now empowered by the blessing of his Mangekyo Sharingan, the technique struck the dream tapir like lightning. In the blink of an eye, the creature's massive form froze solid. Deep within its eyes, the crimson swirl of the Sharingan flickered into being, pulling its mind helplessly into Nathan's crafted illusion. Nathan knew he lacked the raw ocular power to seize full command of a tailed beast, something only legends like Uchiha Madara could achieve. But immobilizing a lower-ranking summon was well within his reach. As the dream tapir stood rooted to the spot, he didn't hesitate. In a blur of motion, he appeared at its side. Raising his right hand, he molded a dense, spiraling sphere of chakra, the big ball Rasengan, its surface crackling with raw energy. With a single, decisive movement, he pressed the churning orb against the tapir's forehead. The impact promised to shatter not just flesh and bone, but the very will that bound the beast to the battlefield. The only difference between this technique and the standard Rasengan is that it consumes far more chakra and in turn grows larger and far more destructive. So why didn't Nathan unleash the wind release, Rasen Shuriken? There were two reasons. First, time simply ran out. By the moment Nathan pressed his giant Rasengan against the dream tapir's skull, Danzo's dagger was already swinging toward him. If Nathan had tried to form the intricate hand seals for an unfinished Rasen Shuriken, Danzo's strike would have landed first, and Nathan wouldn't have had an opportunity to attack at all. Second, the power of the giant Rasengan was already more than sufficient. Crackling sounds filled the air as the blow shattered bone to shreds. Blood burst from the tapir's eyes, ears, mouth, and nostrils, sealing its fate in an instant. In that moment, Nathan could only stand in awe and horror at the terrifying might of the Mangekyo Sharingan's genjutsu. Even a summoned creature as mighty as the dream tapir can't wrench itself free once ensnared in an illusion, not even when its life hangs in the balance. Otherwise, Danzo would only need to sidestep at the last moment and blunt the full force of his big ball Rasengan, leaving Nathan with nothing but a shattered summons and another narrow escape. That possibility raced through Nathan's mind and drove him to sharpen his focus. He ducked just in time as Danzo's short blade sliced downward, the steel whispering past his shoulder. Springing forward, Nathan planted his feet against the massive flank of the nightmare tapir, using its weight to steady his charge. In one fluid motion, he spun to face Danzo, Mangekyo Sharingan pupils blazing with intent. He was ready to cast a powerful Genjutsu Sharingan and seize his enemy's will, but in that very instant, the tide of battle shifted in a way Nathan never could have anticipated. Chapter 662, Full Preparation and Divine Power. Nathan hadn't prepared ahead of time, so when he whirled to face Danzo, he couldn't instantly summon a mind-controlling illusion. That fraction of a second was all the opening Danzo needed. Almost reading Nathan's thoughts, Danzo moved without hesitation. He slipped his sword back into its sheath, formed a swift hand seal, and unleashed a potent illusion, the Dark Walk technique. Ranked A in difficulty and effective at mid to close range, this visual genjutsu plunges its target into total darkness, completely blocking their vision. Its very existence underscores how dangerous it is to rely on the Sharingan in battle. In fact, Hashirama Senju originally devised the Dark Walk technique specifically to counter Madara Uchiha's Sharingan. Now Danzo wielded it against Nathan, correctly guessing that he might have activated the Mangekyo Sharingan and intentionally deploying this jutsu as the perfect antidote. For weeks, Danzo had waited for the perfect moment. Every time he'd tried before, either the timing was off or his hands were tied. Now, at last, he had his chance. Without hesitation, he unleashed his trump card, the illusion, darkness walking technique. Nathan, caught just a hair's breadth away, froze in place. Seizing the opportunity, Danzo closed the distance in a single stride, swung his sword, and aimed a swift cut at Nathan's neck. Nathan's eyes widened as alarm bells rang in his mind. He tried to summon his Mangekyo Sharingan to buy himself precious seconds and slip away. But Danzo's technique had been developed expressly to neutralize the Sharingan. It had no loopholes. Its activation seal was deceptively simple. Once mastered, it could be cast in an instant. There had been no chance for casual practice or hesitation. In the blink of an eye, light was snatched from Nathan's vision. A silken veil of absolute darkness swallowed him, dragging him down into an endless abyss before he could even react. Nathan felt the world collapse around him, leaving only empty darkness. He knew, of course, that it was merely an illusion. In front of him, Danzo loomed, silent, motionless, undoubtedly plotting his next move. The very thought sent a cold breeze skirting Nathan's neck, as if a blade hung ready to strike. Instinct took over. Nathan bounded backward, creating distance in an instant. But as his vision shuttered shut, even the simplest chakra-driven technique, walking on water, felt foreign. It wasn't that his chakra control had weakened. It was panic, pure and simple. Sight often seems trivial until you lose it. Though he was fully aware that his blindness would be fleeting, his subconscious rebelled against the sudden darkness. His footwork stiffened, his reflexes dulled. If this had been any ordinary shinobi, the hesitation might have gone unnoticed. Nathan could have regained his composure and shattered the illusion in time. But facing Danzo, even the slightest delay felt like a fatal flaw. Determined to push through, Nathan steadied his breathing, centered his chakra, and braced himself for whatever came next. Nathan's heart pounded as Danzo's blade whistled through the air. The first strike came so fast Nathan barely registered it, but he managed to twist aside, the katana's edge grazing his sleeve. Instead of disappointment, Danzo's eyes gleamed with excitement. He had seen Nathan hesitate, and that gave him all the confidence in the world. Without pausing to regroup, Danzo lashed out again, aiming for Nathan's chest. Instinct guided Nathan's next dodge. The steel passed inches from his ribs. Danzo's next blow was even closer, too close to simply evade forever. Realizing the danger, Nathan steeled himself. As Danzo lunged in for the third strike, Nathan activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and unleashed its ultimate defense, Susanoo, the godly armor of chakra. From Nathan's back erupted a towering silver-white skeletal form. Its half-skull face hovered just beyond his shoulder, eyes blazing with otherworldly light. Danzo thrust his blade straight for Nathan's heart, confident that the boy was trapped. A triumphant smile curved his lips, only to vanish in an instant. The moment the Susanoo's skull appeared, Danzo's blade struck nothing but empty air. Nathan was already gone. Nathan's short sword rang hollow against the enormous skeleton, the clash of steel and bone echoing without a scratch on its ivory armor, and no harm to the darkness swirling inside. Before he could press the attack, the creature's massive frame surged forward, shoving him back until he skidded nearly 20 meters away. At that distance, the lingering grip of the illusionary darkness walk technique began to loosen. Seizing the moment, Nathan summoned his Susanoo and unleashed it upon Danzo, driving him back to the edge of the clearing. No one interfered as the spectral warrior pushed Danzo to his limit. Freed instantly from the illusion's thrall, Nathan's vision cleared. He glanced across the battlefield to see Danzo lingering only a few dozen feet away, and he didn't rush forward. Instead, Nathan steadied himself beneath the crushing spiritual weight of the Susanoo and drew in a fresh surge of chakra. He opened the second phase of his technique, and then the third. A torrent of energy burst from his core, racing through the silver-white half-skeleton that guarded him. Pulsing veins of chakra wove outward, layering raw sinew and muscle over the bone, then sealing it all in a glittering membrane of chakra-infused skin. With each added layer, the spectral armor solidified, transforming into something terrifyingly real, brimming with power and ready to be unleashed. Nathan stood firm, his Mangekyo Sharingan blazing as it crossed the 30,000 mark, unlocking a new tier of Susanoo. He drew in a trembling breath, then roared, pouring every ounce of chakra into his spectral avatar. In an instant, the crude skeletal form of his Susanoo was sheathed in the Karasu Tengu armor, its lines recalling an ancient battlefield general. The armored warrior's presence drove the water beneath them outward in a concussive wave. A white-hot pain lanced through Nathan's body, and his eyes flickered in agony. Of course, every power demands its toll. Susanoo threatened not only to rob him of his sight, but to consume him from within. Only his unusually robust physique, already rated at 21 points, allowed him to endure the strain. Anyone weaker would have collapsed under the backlash. To force himself further would court the same fate as Uchiha Itachi, clinging to medicine just to stay alive. Clenching his teeth, Nathan willed his body to settle into the flow of chakra. As the torment subsided to a dull burn, he raised his gaze to Danzo. His opponent, startled by the sudden escalation, retreated another step, his expression a mixture of awe and dread at the sight of Nathan's fully armored Susanoo. Nathan steadied himself, ready for whatever came next. Through the Mangekyo Sharingan's heightened perception, Nathan watched every shift in Danzo's expression. Greed glinted in Danzo's eyes as he stared at the spectral Susanoo enveloping Nathan's form. Yet buried beneath that avarice lay a flicker of long-dormant fear. Still, Danzo lingered, clearly clinging to some desperate scheme of his own. But when confronted with absolute power, all plots dissolve into nothing. Without a moment's hesitation, Nathan activated Susanoo's second stage ability, the devastating Yasaka Magatama. Chapter 6 and 63, the final trump card. Nathan's Susanoo unleashed 5 enormous Magatama, hurling them straight at Danzo. 5, an increase from the 3 he could manage before. Back when his Mangekyo Sharingan was only halfway to its full evolution, 20,000, 50,000, his Susanoo topped out at second stage, and he could fire only 3 Yasaka Magatama at once. Now, with his chakra pool expanded and his Susanoo more fully realized, he'd confirmed his theory. The more the Susanoo matured, the more Magatama it could produce. 5 still fell short of Madara Uchiha's famed 14, but it surpassed Itachi's 4, an encouraging milestone for Nathan. Eyes gleaming behind the 3 Tomoe Sharingan, Nathan focused on Danzo. As soon as Danzo dodged one volley, Nathan deftly redirected all 5 Magatama in midair, tightening the angles to seal off every escape route. The razor-sharp orbs swished through the air, drawing Danzo's vision in multiple directions at once. Danzo's face, already twisted in fury and fear, contorted further. He could feel each Magatama slicing through the air like scorching blades, threatening to carve him apart if he misstepped. Sweat beaded on his brow as he scrambled for an opening, but Nathan's next move was already in motion. With a subtle shift of chakra, Nathan readied his true trump card. As the Magatama closed in from all sides, Danzo's options shrank to nothing. The final confrontation had begun. Nathan made no attempt to dodge. Instead, he quickly formed a hand seal and activated his water release, water escape technique, plunging into the shallow pool at his feet. Almost at once, 5 Magatama charges slammed into the water's surface. Boom! A tremendous explosion erupted. The water Nathan had summoned, with both his water escape, explosive water wave, and its larger counterpart, water escape, great explosive water wave, vaporized in an instant, shrouding the area in a thick white steam. But this was mere condensation, not the chakra-laden mist of his hidden mist technique, so his Byakugan still pierced the haze without difficulty. Through the steam, he spotted Danzo. Remarkably, Danzo bore no sign of injury from the blast, and he was already lunging forward at full speed. Nathan frowned at the oddly unsteady rhythm of his opponent's footwork, wondering what trick Danzo might be hiding. Whether he was injured or not, it struck Nathan as strangely reckless that Danzo would press the attack after witnessing the full might of his Susanoo offense and defense. Danzo had to know the outcome already leaned heavily in Nathan's favor. As the proverb says, keep your green mountains and you'll never lack firewood. Nathan was sure Danzo wasn't a fool. Under normal circumstances, he'd use the cover of the white fog to slip away and devise a fresh plan. But since Danzo had chosen to return, he clearly believed he'd found a way to turn the tables. Nathan's mind raced, running through every scrap of information he had on his rival, searching for that hidden trump card. He focused on Danzo's right arm through the swirling mist. The sealing formula was gone. No concealed Sharingan remained. Without the yin-powered balance that the Sharingan provides, there was no way Danzo could have grafted Hashirama's cells onto himself. Whatever edge he thought he held vanished in an instant. Nathan's Byakugan confirmed his suspicions. His opponent's right arm was now nothing more than ordinary flesh, completely cut off from any wood-release chakra. Without it, not a single wood-style jutsu could be summoned. So what did that leave him? Izanagi. Nathan's thoughts flickered to the forbidden Uchiha rite that could rewrite life and death itself, but only for an instant. A lone Sharingan could sustain Izanagi for barely 60 seconds, and at tremendous cost to both chakra and ocular health. With just one Sharingan, the technique was more liability than lifeline. A chill ran down his spine. How could his foe be so confident that Nathan didn't already know Izanagi? And then it clicked. Izanagi wasn't an ordinary skill, as the ultimate taboo of the Uchiha clan. No promising youth, however gifted, would ever be granted that right. The clan elders would never let a young genius squander an eye when the real prize was the Mangekyo Sharingan, legendary for its miracles. One lost eye meant a shattered chance at that true power. His enemy simply couldn't have Izanagi in reserve. Nathan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. With his rival's last trump card ruled out, the path to victory lay clear. Nathan sat alone in the dim light, replaying the facts over and over in his mind. Uchiha Shisui had been ambushed by Danzo and struck down with Izanagi. One of his precious Sharingan was stolen in the process. Yet somehow, Danzo knew Shisui had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan and had delved into forbidden clan lore. How had he learned so much, so quickly? On the surface, it seemed impossible. If Shisui had openly revealed his Mangekyo Sharingan to his own clan, the other Uchiha would surely have taken notice. They would have flocked to protect their brother, even against Root's watchful surveillance. And if anyone within the clan had really known, Root would have uncovered the betrayal long ago. But no rescue mission had ever materialized. No insider leaks had reached Root's ears, only the cold, professional hit that stole Shisui's eye. The pieces began to click in Nathan's head. Shisui must have kept his Mangekyo secrets locked away from his fellow Uchiha, revealing them only to himself. Danzo hadn't relied on clan gossip, he had engineered a ruse. Perhaps he planted subtle clues, unmistakable hints of Mangekyo power, while observing Shisui's Susanoo in action. If Danzo believed the technique carried hidden drawbacks, he'd be all the more eager to snatch that eye and pry out its secrets. The more Nathan thought it through, the clearer it became. Danzo had fooled them both. Shisui's tight-lipped discretion, combined with his dazzling Susanoo display, was precisely the misdirection Danzo needed. And now Nathan knew the truth behind the ambush, and the true depths of Danzo's cunning. Nathan felt it most when Danzo's anxiety spiked. After all, it had only been a minute, barely time to draw a full breath. His mind raced through every possible scenario. Then, as the white mist curled away, Danzo stepped forward, eyes narrowed in determination. Nathan met his gaze and made his decision. He would exploit the gap in his opponent's information. And if he was wrong, he would simply fight on. He still had more than enough chakra, and in a few days his body would undergo its next transformation, further boosting his physical strength. From past experience, he knew that around that time, the strain-induced blindness of his Mangekyo Sharingan would ease. A little extra use now wasn't likely to push him over the edge. So long as he avoided total blindness, he was confident he could hold out. His real goal was to force the Mangekyo Sharingan to evolve into its eternal form, eliminating the risk of vision loss altogether. In that light, this gamble was minor. If it worked, Nathan would spare himself countless future headaches. With that thought, he squared his shoulders and prepared to strike. Nathan steadied his control over the Susanoo and sent its massive blade hurtling toward Danzo. The wind roaring off the chakra construct slammed into Danzo's chest, and in that instant he pinpointed Nathan's position. With reflexive precision, Danzo dropped back out of range, narrowly evading the onslaught, then retreated while parrying each swing of the giant sword. His every move was urgent, harried, desperate, too polished to be genuine. Nathan watched carefully. If he hadn't already suspected a ruse, Danzo's performance might have fooled him. But over the last 10 seconds, Danzo had been feigning weakness so convincingly that he even appeared to take a fatal chest wound from the Susanoo's blade. No matter how realistic an act could be, it would never capture the true panic of life and death stakes. He remembered their last encounter, after Sasuke's decisive strike. Danzo had, played his final card, willing to die and take his opponent down with him in a backhanded gambit. That had been real. This was theater. Nathan's grip tightened on the Susanoo's hilt. The next blow would end the charade and expose Danzo's true intent. Nathan realized at once that his opponent must be using the invincible technique Izanagi, an ability that could rewrite any unfavorable outcome into mere illusion. He didn't let on that he understood. Instead, he kept his expression calm and played along. After a moment of careful observation, he activated his Susanoo. In a flash of inky violet armor, he closed the distance to Danzo, drew the long sword at his hip, and struck with a single decisive blow. Danzo collapsed as though mortally wounded, and then vanished. Nathan's brow creased in genuine confusion, but relief bloomed in his chest. So it was Izanagi. He'd guessed right, and now a lot of danger seemed to have evaporated. Before Nathan could think further, Danzo reappeared behind him, a gleaming kunai in hand. With ruthless precision, Danzo drove the blade into Nathan's back. Through his enhanced vision, Nathan even caught Danzo's triumphant smile. But the moment the kunai pierced flesh, Nathan's figure dissolved into thin air. Danzo's confident grin faded into surprise, though outwardly he remained composed, as if nothing had gone amiss. Danzo's mind raced as he felt the last precious seconds of his invincibility tick away. He was certain that, once Nathan unleashed his Susanoo, those remaining moments would be more than enough to kill him. He'd prepared 2 contingencies in advance. If Nathan held back and didn't summon Susanoo, Danzo would use the invulnerability window to slip away. If he did summon it, Danzo would seize the chance to strike him down. He'd even accounted for Nathan deploying Susanoo a second time. From watching the first activation, Danzo knew summoning the spectral armor wasn't instantaneous. It required a brief telltale moment. He'd seen it happen before and regretted not capitalizing on that opening. Now, bolstered by the confidence only a veteran shinobi with countless battles under his belt could possess, he was determined not to let the opportunity pass him by again. As for Nathan's so-called predictive eye jutsu, Danzo had long since dismissed its reputation. He chalked up Nathan's uncanny reflexes to keen instincts and high intelligence, not supernatural foresight. There was no way his young opponent could anticipate every move Danzo planned. With that conviction, Danzo braced himself, ready to turn Nathan's moment of triumph into his final downfall. All Danzo had to do was wait for Nathan to reappear, and then he could finish him off. Yet the seconds stretched into 10, 20, and still Nathan didn't step back into view. Danzo's confidence wavered as he stared into the empty air. "What's going on?" he muttered. Nathan had once used that strange ocular trick to delay his reappearance, but only for a few seconds. Now more than 10 had passed, and Danzo's plan was unraveling. Beads of sweat prickled his brow. Each heartbeat hammered the same question. Had he misjudged Nathan's ability? His certainty collapsed. He'd assumed that Nathan's delay jutsu could last only a handful of seconds, but he had no proof. If the dreaded prophecy-like technique wasn't Nathan's secret secondary eye skill, then what was? And did Nathan even know about Izanagi in the first place? One by one, self-doubts flooded Danzo's mind. He'd made too many assumptions and come wholly unprepared. The victory he'd counted on slipped from his grasp, and with it, his advantage in the shadows. No, I can't stay here. In an instant, Danzo resolved to flee. He melted into the shadows and sprinted with all his might, putting as much distance as he could between himself and the battlefield. 30 seconds later, he'd carved out a considerable lead, but then his right Sharingan flickered out of existence, its crimson glow draining into a dull gray. He ignored it and kept running, heart hammering in his chest. Suddenly, as if summoned by his thoughts, a figure materialized in his path. Nathan. Danzo's pupils constricted at the sight. He'd allowed for this possibility, but still it was disconcerting. He braced himself. A blade of moonlight flashed as Danzo swung his sword in a ruthless, lunging strike. He aimed for Nathan's heart the instant the illusion dissolved, but Nathan wasn't there. In the blink of an eye, he'd vanished again. Danzo whirled to press the advantage, only to find Nathan had reappeared at his right flank, the side Danzo could no longer see. A cold jolt ran through him as realization hit. His blind eye left him utterly vulnerable. "Impressive," Danzo muttered under his breath. He tightened his grip on the sword, prepared for whatever move Nathan would make next. Nathan sensed the shift in Danzo's breathing before he saw it. Instinctively, Danzo turned his head, only to meet Nathan's eyes, black as twin eclipses. "Not good," Danzo thought, alarm flaring in his chest. Realizing he'd been baited, Danzo tried to shut his eyes and break the connection, but Nathan had long anticipated this move. The moment their gazes locked, Nathan slipped behind Danzo's defenses, seizing control of his opponent's body. In the same instant, he formed a perfect Rasengan in his free hand. With a swift step forward, Nathan slammed the swirling orb of chakra directly against Danzo's sternum. There was a grisly crack as bone splintered, and Danzo's heart shattered under the impact. His body went limp, collapsing to the ground in a heap. Nathan withdrew his hand, the Rasengan dissipating in a wisp of dissipating chakra. He stood over Danzo's broken form, breathing steadily, every muscle primed for whatever came next. Chapter 664, The Final Strike and the Return Crack. Danzo's body thudded to the ground, lifeless, still locked in the Manjikyo Sharingan's control, even as his heart gave out. It was a bitter end for a man who'd schemed so ruthlessly. In his final moments, he couldn't break free from the very power he coveted. Nathan watched the fallen shinobi with a mixture of relief and regret. He'd subtly guided Danzo into this trap, but ultimately it was Danzo's own insatiable greed, the drive to seize the Manjikyo Sharingan for himself, that sealed his fate. Nathan paused to catch his breath, glancing upward at the dome-like barrier that had enclosed the battlefield since the fight began. Aside from himself, only the 4 Jonin still remained inside, furiously sustaining the ward. Every last one of Danzo's allies had fallen, either by Nathan's hand or during the chaos of battle, but these 4 had slipped through the cracks. Nathan would not tolerate any loose ends. He tightened his lips and took a step forward, ready to extinguish the remaining threats once and for all. But then the barrier shimmered, flickered, and vanished. Nathan halted in mid-stride, eyes narrowing at the sudden breach. He recognized the moment for what it was, an opportunity, or perhaps a final trick from someone desperate. With no time to waste, he raised his hand and formed the hand seals in rapid succession. Shadow Clone Technique. In an instant, the air around him rippled, and multiple Nathans appeared, each poised and ready. As the real Nathan surged forward, his clones spread out, surrounding the 4 Jonin. There would be no escape this time. With the barrier gone and his clones in position, Nathan prepared to settle every lingering score. The battlefield had nearly emptied, but his mission wasn't over. So long as a single enemy soldier remained, he would see it through to the very end. A thunderous crack rang out, and a cloud of chakra smoke billowed through the trees. When the haze cleared, Nathan, once alone, had become 4 identical figures. They exchanged a brief nod, then silently split up, each vanishing in a different direction. On the forest's outer rim, the Crimson Rain squad holding the barrier shared a silent understanding. As soon as they confirmed Danzo's death, they abandoned all communication and sprinted off into the undergrowth, intent on carrying the grim news back to the village and awaiting further orders. Their plan was sound, but their strength paled beside Nathan's. Even drained from a fierce confrontation, his shadow clone technique rendered them no match. Minutes later, Nathan and his 3 clones regrouped at the forest's heart. Each figure hoisted a body over their shoulder, the 4 fallen shinobi of the Hongyu team. Without a word, they dropped the corpses onto the littered ground. Nathan swept his gaze across the ruined battlefield. Shattered trunks, upturned earth, and smoldering chakra remnants marked the intensity of the clash. If an experienced reconnaissance ninja stumbled upon this scene, they'd deduce exactly what had transpired, and that was the last thing Nathan wanted. He permitted himself only a moment's pause before formulating his next move. Nathan scanned the forest once more, frustration rising. He still couldn't pinpoint the village's location, and that struck him as impossible. Over the past 10 days, he and Danzo's remaining root operatives had done everything they could to cover their tracks. But Nathan knew Konoha would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. When things were calm, the village might have looked the other way. Now that Danzo, a respected elder of Konoha, lay dead, they would demand answers. If they dug deep enough, they would find something, some trace of their presence. It was only a matter of time before the entire battlefield was exposed. Knowing he had to leave behind as few clues as possible, Nathan wasted no time. He summoned 3 shadow clones, and together they set to work erasing every sign of the skirmish. First, Nathan unleashed a fire release, incineration technique, reducing Danzo's body and those of the fallen root shinobi to nothing but a fine, drifting ash. No remains would betray what had happened here. Next, the real challenge began, wiping out all evidence embedded in the forest itself. Trees scarred by chakra streams, footprints pressed into the earth, even the slightest hint of residual jutsu, none of it could remain. With meticulous care, Nathan and his clones combed the area, restoring bent saplings to their original positions and stamping out the telltale glow of leftover chakra. As the final ember died, Nathan allowed himself a single, measured breath. For now, the battlefield was clean, but he knew that only a perfect job would keep Konoha from discovering the secret of Danzo's last stand. Nathan's plan was straightforward and ruthlessly effective. First, he unleashed a barrage of high-level ninjutsu to utterly flatten the surrounding terrain. With the area reduced to a blasted wasteland, no curious shinobi would dare approach. Satisfied, he formed multiple shadow clones and activated his wind release, wind wings, alongside his chakra feather cloak. In an instant, he was soaring back toward Konohagakure at top speed. He knew that Danzo's sudden demise had thrown Root into turmoil. The hidden division wasn't yet shattered, but it was vulnerable and leaderless, ripe for the picking. Nathan's vendetta against Danzo was never solely about settling a personal score. His true objective lay in Root's secret vaults, forbidden scrolls, priceless artifacts, and classified intel that hadn't seen daylight in decades. He already had every step of his heist plotted out. A little over 30 minutes later, Nathan slipped back into the village. This time he masked his features with the transformation technique, adopting the face of a stranger. Beneath that mundane guise, he paced the streets, listening for rumors of increased Root activity or suspicious troop movements. The organization's agents would be scrambling to regroup and reassert control, but they wouldn't be expecting an intruder wearing their own chaos like a cloak. Now, with Konogakure buzzing in uneasy anticipation, Nathan's real operation was about to begin. He had the perfect cover, the element of surprise, and the means to slip in and out before Root could rally. All that remained was to strike. Nathan had learned that Danzo had dispatched operatives to capture him, so sentries from the Root had been posted at the village gates and even near his home. Forced into hiding, he slipped away under cover of night, eluding every patrol. After weaving silently through thickets and moonlit trails, he emerged on the edge of the forest that marked the entrance to the hidden Root headquarters beneath Konoha. He remembered this spot well. During his first confrontation with Root Shinobi, he'd tapped into their memories and uncovered the location of this secret underground base. Until now, there had been no opportunity to visit, but tonight was perfect. Standing beneath the gnarled trees, Nathan raised a hand to his forehead and released the guardian seal. His vision blurred for an instant, then cleared as the pale whiteness of his eyes snapped open. Peering through his cracked Konoha headband, he could make out 2 Root agents stationed below, flanking the hatch that led underground. A cold smile touched his lips. With a steady breath, he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and unleashed the specialized dojutsu technique in his left eye, Heaven's Guard. In that moment, Nathan's form wavered and vanished into thin air, leaving the sentries unaware that their prey was already upon them. Nathan didn't hesitate. He slipped from behind the tree, ignored the 2 Root shinobi posted at the gate, and walked straight into the compound. Once he was safely inside, he activated his Heaven's Guard technique and vanished from sight, reappearing a few paces beyond the entrance. The courtyard was deserted. Nathan knew the base's general location from what those captured Root agents had revealed, but its interior layout was still a mystery. To find the Root's secret archives, he would have to explore on his own. Fortunately, Danzo's recent assault had pulled most of the operatives away on a manhunt. Only a handful remained behind, giving Nathan the time he needed. He darted into a nearby corridor, activated his Byakugan, and began scanning every hallway and chamber. Time seemed to stretch as he methodically checked room after room, careful not to trigger any traps. After almost 30 minutes, his Byakugan picked up something concealed behind a false wall panel. Nathan pressed his finger against the seam, and the panel slid open to reveal a small, dimly lit chamber overflowing with scrolls and leather-bound tomes. He stepped inside, hands trembling with anticipation. Plucking a dusty book from the shelf at random, he flipped it open and felt a surge of exhilaration as he read the first lines. This was exactly the information he'd risked everything to find. Nathan's heart quickened as he realized the scroll before him contained the complete instructions for the Flying Thunder God technique. Created by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, and later refined and popularized by Minato Namikaze, this teleportation ninjutsu had even tantalized Danzo. Yet, lacking the proper lineage and the innate capacity to withstand the jutsu's destructive recoil, Danzo could never hope to master it. No matter how earnestly he copied the sealed text, the technique would forever elude him. But the scroll room held more than just one coveted art. Ancient tomes and weathered scrolls lined the shelves, cataloging everything from commonplace ninjutsu to the most obscure clan secrets. As Nathan flipped through the brittle pages, he realized that many manuscripts detailed the hidden techniques of the village's great families. Though the entries were often fragmentary, they spoke volumes about Danzo's ambitions, his drive to claim every forbidden skill and consolidate power for himself. Chapter 665, Encounter and Takeover. Nathan stood inside the dimly lit chamber, forcing himself to cast aside any lingering thoughts of Danzo's grand designs. No matter how long Danzo had schemed or how many contingencies he had laid, it was all irrelevant now. Nathan's priority was clear: secure and remove everything in this room as quickly as possible. He moved with practiced efficiency. In moments, he'd stripped the shelves of every book and scroll, piling them neatly in the center of the floor. Then he reached into his ninja pouch and withdrew a sealed scroll marked with intricate runes. Breaking the wax seal, he unfurled it and adopted the proper hand seals to activate the sealing array. At his command, hundreds of silver glyphs shimmered to life, slithering out of the parchment like ethereal insects. They spread across the stacked tomes and manuscripts, weaving a lattice of translucent energy. Satisfied that the array had fully enveloped the documents, Nathan shifted his fingers into the final seal and called out, "Seal!" In an instant, the books and scrolls vanished without a trace. All that remained was a single word, "Sealed," imprinted in glowing script on the scroll itself. Nathan allowed himself a small nod of approval. With a quick brush of his hand, chasing away imaginary dust, he rolled the scroll back up and returned it to his pouch. Perfecting the sealing array had been a long journey, but moments like this made every trial worthwhile. With the documents secured, Nathan was one step closer to uncovering the truth Danzo had tried so hard to bury. Without the sealing scroll, siphoning this place dry without raising an alarm would have been impossible. Yet Nathan had done it as effortlessly as flicking a switch. After one final sweep to ensure the room lay empty, he pivoted and headed for the exit. His mission was complete. He'd barely taken 2 steps when something shot out from a shadowed corner and wrapped around his torso. A branch. Wood release, he thought. Nathan's pale eyes snapped open. He scanned the darkness and made out a boy no older than 8 or 9, clad in a root operative's mask, a living wooden limb extending from his arm. Recognition hit him. This was Yamato, Orochimaru's prized test subject, who'd fused Hashirama's cells to wield wood release. Though lately he went by the name Jia, Nathan didn't struggle. Instead, he feigned curiosity and met the boy's gaze. "Who are you?" he asked calmly. The boy said nothing. He stared at Nathan through the narrow slits of his ambu mask, his gaze icy and unyielding. After a long, tense moment, he finally spoke. "You're not one of the base's shinobi. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" His voice was so cold, it might have cut steel. Nathan shook his head slightly, wryly thinking, Danzo really does a number on people, brainwashing good kids like this. With the clarity granted by his Byakugan, Nathan had already spotted dozens of root agents assembling deeper in the tunnel. Yamato must have signaled them before Nathan even moved. There was no time to lose. He wrenched free from the tangled branches, pinning him in place, then darted toward the far end of the passage. He didn't intend to kill the Ambu operative. He had too much respect for Yamato, and he certainly didn't want to reveal his Sharingan. As long as he wasn't caught in the act and left no clear evidence, the village would have no solid proof to pin the incident on him. After all, he wasn't just any Jonin. He was an Uchiha, and that alone would give anyone pause. Nathan didn't bother to hide. In Konoha, you can shrug off evidence and pin a crime on an average ninja. No one gives it a second thought. But when you're dealing with someone who wields the Sharingan, suspicion alone won't do. Instead of fading into the undergrowth, Nathan struck every piece of proof from existence. He wiped away footprints in the forest, crushed the fallen leaves where bodies once lay, even erased the faint crimson swirl left by his Sharingan. Thoughts raced through his mind as he slipped through the core, riders of the root compound. Behind him, Yamato's wooden tendrils lashed out in a desperate pursuit, each branch a deadly whip. Nathan darted to the side, fluid as water, narrowly escaping capture. Rounding a corner, he paused for only a heartbeat, enough time to flare his left Mangekyo Sharingan and activate its fabled Heaven's Guard. Instantly, his form blurred, then vanished altogether. Yamato skidded to a halt in the empty hallway. He stared at the space Nathan had occupied, bewilderment etched in his features. But Nathan didn't wait to be found. Maintaining the Heaven's Guard, he phased through a solid wall and emerged closer to the base's main entrance. There, dozens of root operatives had already gathered, stacking obstacles and sealing every hallway as if the entire compound were under siege. Unfazed, Nathan slipped past their defenses. His heart pounded with urgency. He had to get out before they realized who'd just slipped through their fingers. And as he sprinted toward freedom, the secret of the Mangekyo still burning behind his eyelids, he knew he'd leave nothing behind but questions. Nathan's Heaven's Guard rendered their defenses useless. He slipped effortlessly past the root ninja barrier and emerged at the base's entrance. Pausing only briefly to steady his breathing and let his vision clear, he prepared to activate Heaven's Guard again and vanish from the compound. Just then, a squadron of Ambu operatives filed through the gate and drifted into the compound's depths. Nathan watched them go, instantly recognizing the black animal masks and silently nodding to himself. This had to be third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi's doing. Word of Danzo's death must have reached him, and now the Hokage was sending in his most trusted agents to seize control of Root. Nathan wondered what course Hiruzen would chart in memory of his old friend. He let the thought pass. No matter what the third Hokage decided, Nathan was ready. In the shinobi world, strength was everything. As long as he remained powerful, even the might of the entire village would be no match for him. Nathan knew that speculating on how Hiruzen Sarutobi might react would achieve nothing. What truly mattered was strengthening himself. His recent raid on the Root's secret chamber had been a success. He'd acquired valuable tools and information to help close the gap between where he stood and where he needed to be. Resolved, Nathan activated his Mangekyo Sharingan, then invoked his Heavenly Guardian technique before slipping out of Root's headquarters. He didn't return home. Instead, he altered his appearance once more and left Konoha village under a new guise. It was still morning, and the villagers would assume he was off training in the nearby forests. That gave him the perfect window to disappear. Once he'd covered a short distance, Nathan paused and opened his Byakugan to scan for tails. Finding no one pursuing him, he flowed chakra through his arms, summoning the twin wind blades of his wind-style, Wind Wings technique. A second surge of chakra cloaked him in feathers with his chakra feather attire. Then, folding his arms like wings, he launched himself into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he became nothing more than a streak of white light, shooting southward past the forest's edge. He soared for several hours, settling only when he reached a remote island off the coast. There, with nothing but sea breeze and the distant call of seabirds, Nathan prepared to test his new abilities in solitude, determined to become the shinobi he knew he could be. The island wasn't large, but it offered more than enough space for Nathan's training. From now on, he would carry on his daily exercises here. Chapter 666, Selection and Allocation. Nathan drifted above the island for several circuits, scanning the terrain until he spotted a relatively flat plateau. He touched down lightly, but instead of reaching for his weapons or rushing into training, he calmly withdrew the sealed scroll from his robes. With a precise gesture, he dispelled its seal, and in an instant, a vast assortment of books and scrolls materialized around him, covering the ground like an ancient library come to life. Nathan surveyed the sprawling collection and murmured, "This is no small task." He picked up the nearest scroll and flipped through its brittle pages. The text detailed a commonplace ninjutsu technique, nothing more than a routine exercise. Satisfied that it offered him nothing new, he set it aside and moved on. The second scroll proved more intriguing. Its pages contained fragmented research on the Nara clan's famed shadow secrets. Nathan frowned. With so little information, he stood no chance of mastering the technique. Even if he could piece it together, he wouldn't bother. The Nara clan's shadows were simply another application of yin-dun energy, and in Nathan's view, nothing compared to the raw power of Susanoo. He had no intention of sacrificing his foremost strength for a secondary skill. Turning to the next volume, Nathan braced himself. There were hundreds more to examine, and each one demanded careful scrutiny. But his resolve was firm. He would sift through every text until he emerged with only the techniques worthy of his path. Nathan flipped through the second scroll, then set it aside and reached for the third. The Root Organization's archive was a mixed bag. Some texts he merely glanced at, others demanded a careful read. Nearly 3 hours later, he'd completed a sweeping review of every scroll and book. At last, he settled on 4 scrolls and a single volume for in-depth study. The 4 scrolls detailed 2 A-rank illusions, Illusion, Wandering Darkness, and Illusion, Nirvana Purgatory, and 2 Earth-style ninjutsu techniques, the B-rank Earth Escape, Earth Flow River, and the C-rank Earth Escape, Heart Beheading. He'd witnessed firsthand how Wandering Darkness could neutralize the Uchiha's Sharingan, a vital countermeasure if he ever crossed paths with the likes of Uchiha Shisui or the young, still-growing Itachi. It made sense to have defenses ready in advance, like carrying an umbrella before the rain. As for the Nirvana Purgatory illusion, he chose it precisely to shore up the gaps in his own skill set. With his selections made, Nathan prepared to master each technique and turn these hidden jutsu into his greatest strengths. Although the technique's raw power was only average, and anyone well-versed in genjutsu could spot and dispel it with ease, it offered one undeniable advantage: area coverage. It was exactly the kind of wide-ranging illusion attack Nathan had been missing. Thanks to the Mangekyo Sharingan, enhancing his already exceptional mental stamina and chakra reserves, once he mastered the final form of this jutsu, its effectiveness would rise well above that of ordinary genjutsu. Nathan estimated that, by then, most genin wouldn't escape it without serious effort. Chunin might slip free only if they were particularly skilled. Jonin, of course, could shrug it off entirely, but he never planned to use this technique against them. He had far more potent Sharingan illusions saved for Jonin-level opponents. Nathan set aside the 2 scrolls detailing genjutsu and picked up the other pair. One described a B-rank ninjutsu, Earth Style, Earth Flow River, while the other recorded a C-rank technique, Earth Style, Heart Beheading Technique. Nathan's newest jutsu, Earth Style, Earth Flow River, ranks among the very best of B-level ninjutsu, capable of literally reshaping the terrain so long as he has enough chakra. With it, he adds a third battlefield-altering technique to his arsenal alongside Water Style, Explosive Water Rush Wave, and its advanced form, Water Style, Large Explosive Water Rush Wave. That versatility is crucial because not every environment suits water techniques. In the Shamo Desert of the Wind Country, for example, water jutsu suffer at least a 50% loss in power, whereas earth jutsu, like Earth Flow River, work without penalty. Even more tempting is the technique's hidden potential, its A-rank evolution, Earth Style, Yellow Spring Swamp. In that form, Nathan could summon a thick, sucking bog capable of entrapping formidable summoned beasts, Mana Snake included. Unfortunately, he never learned that advanced version from Danzo, so for now he must master only the base technique. Finally, Nathan added Earth Style, Heart Beheading Technique to his repertoire, not for outright attack, but as an escape hatch. By channeling Earth Chakra into a swift counter-strike move, he gains just enough time and space to dodge a lethal blow and slip away when a fight turns against him. Nathan knew that with Heaven's Guard at his disposal, he could shrug off most attacks, but he couldn't rely on his Sharingan every time danger struck. Even if his Mangekyo Sharingan someday evolved into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and blindness was no longer a threat, the dojutsu still had its limits. He needed another means of escape, another way to minimize damage. Ideally, he would master complementary ninjutsu so that he wasn't forced to lean on his eyes alone. Nathan set aside the 2 scrolls he'd just finished studying and reached for the final volume. When he opened it, he realized it wasn't a treatise on ninjutsu, genjutsu, or taijutsu at all, but rather an in-depth analysis of the Akimichi clan's multi-size secret technique. A note on the first page caught his eye. Complete compilation requires 6 volumes. As everyone knew, the Akimichi clan's secret relied on wielding pure yang chakra to expand and contract the body at will. That fact intrigued Nathan. His own body-strengthening method, what he called the Palm Divine Technique, also drew on yang chakra. If he could cross-reference this research with his existing skill set, he might adapt the multi-size principles to new applications, an extra escape route, a means to cushion blows, or even a surprise counterattack. With renewed determination, he began to turn the pages, eager to see whether the clan's centuries-old wisdom could unlock fresh possibilities for his own training. Nathan paused to consider his next move. Rather than rushing to develop a wholly new body-strengthening secret technique, he knew it would suffice, at least for now, to improve the efficiency of his existing Palm Immortal technique. Satisfied with that goal, he set aside the 4 scrolls and the book, then formed hand seals to cast a sealing array that compressed the remaining texts into neat scrolls. With his knowledge safely stored, Nathan turned to chakra management. Thanks to this morning's breakthrough, perfecting the chakra feather robe, he could now conserve 182,000 chakra points every day. That substantial reserve would be his capital for further training. Recognizing how draining A-rank ninjutsu could be, he resolved to split his daily savings into 5 dedicated pools of energy. He allocated 50,000 chakra to each of his 2 A-rank genjutsu, Darkness Walk Technique and Nirvana Abode Technique. He then set aside 40,000 chakra for the B-rank Earth Style, Earth Flow River, and another 40,000 for the C-rank Earth Style, Heart Beheading. The remaining 2,000 chakra, modest though it was, he earmarked for mastering the Akimichi clan's secret multi-section multiplication technique. With his strategy in place, Nathan felt ready to push his abilities ever further. Nathan still had only 2,000 chakra points to spare, and on its own, that would have been meager. But he funneled 36,000 more into his Palm Immortal technique every day, so the small reserve wouldn't interrupt his training. Satisfied, he wasted no time. Forming the hand seals, he unleashed the multi-shadow clone technique. A swirl of chakra smoke erupted, and 8 identical Nathans emerged around him. He assigned each clone its Fanfic drills and dispatched them to the training ground. Then Nathan settled into a deep meditative state, focusing his mind and spirit on the flow of chakra. Meanwhile, across the village, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Nathan remained blissfully unaware that the entire community was on the brink of upheaval. Elder Danzo's sudden, unexplained death had sent shockwaves through the council. Adding fuel to the fire were the 2 senior advisors, Mitamune Noden and Utane Koharu. Though both had privately questioned some of Danzo's harsher methods, their decades-long friendship compelled them to demand answers. Now, with their old comrade mysteriously slain, their investigations threatened to plunge the village into chaos. Meanwhile, they ramped up the pressure on Sarutobi Hiruzen, urging him to spare no effort in tracking down the murderer. Chapter 667, Proportion, Konoha, Hokage's Office. Hiruzen Sarutobi stared down at the thick stack of mission files he'd just confiscated from Root's headquarters. The late afternoon light slanted through the window, illuminating the pages that made his blood run cold. Even a seasoned politician like himself felt a chill at some of the covert operations Danzo had ordered: unauthorized abductions of clan members, clandestine experiments on human subjects, and ruthless bloodline research that trampled every ethical boundary. Hiruzen had once trusted Danzo implicitly, believing their goals were at least partially aligned with the well-being of the Hidden Leaf Village. Now it was clear he'd gravely underestimated his old comrade's ambition. There was no halfway loyalty in Danzo's world. Perhaps only 1/3 of his actions had truly served the village. The rest had been driven by his own thirst for power and secrets. A surge of gratitude washed over Hiruzen as he recalled sending his Anbu to seize Root's headquarters the moment whispers of Danzo's illegal activities reached him. If those records had surfaced elsewhere, exposing Danzo's human experiments and the forcible study of clan bloodlines, the scandal would have shattered the village from within. At least now, the evidence was contained, and the extent of Danzo's betrayals lay squarely before him. After scanning through the mission reports, Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen set all but 2 aside. He picked up the first dossier, which concerned the shinobi known as Yamato. When he confirmed that Yamato truly possessed the wood release ability originally wielded by the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, he couldn't hide his excitement. No one in Konoha understood the power of wood release better than Hiruzen. Having witnessed Hashirama's devastating techniques firsthand, he knew they could fell thousands, or even tens of thousands of opponents in a single strike. Even more crucially, wood release had proven uniquely effective against the tailed beasts, the nuclear weapons each of the great villages held in reserve. Those beasts were the keystones of the uneasy peace that kept the shinobi world from spiraling into all-out war, for every village feared the devastation their rivals could unleash. But with Yamato's abilities, Konoha would no longer be solely on the defensive. It would regain the strategic initiative. Hiruzen reflected on past attempts by other villages to replicate Hashirama's power. They had sacrificed countless elite shinobi in the effort, and ultimately failed. Their experiments were quietly abandoned long ago. Yet here were Orochimaru and Danzo, against all odds, who had continued the research and actually succeeded. The implications were staggering, and Hiruzen knew it was time to read the second report. When Hiruzen Sarutobi thought of Orochimaru, his face went dark. He used to feel guilty for letting his former pupil slip away, so much so that he'd recommended Namikaze Minato as fourth Hokage just to secure this mission dossier. But any lingering hesitation had vanished. Orochimaru's cruelty was undeniable. This file alone detailed how many Konoha shinobi he'd dissected in his twisted quest to recreate the first Hokage's wood release. And that didn't even count the other victims he'd experimented on. Frankly, Hiruzen could have ordered his arrest on the spot, yet the bond of teacher and student held him back. "No," he whispered. "Once I step down, I'll keep him under close watch." Setting Orochimaru's dossier aside, Hiruzen picked up another mission report with a grave expression. This one chronicled the Root's operations against Nathan and included a thorough analysis of every scrap of intelligence they'd gathered on him. The report's cutoff was yesterday, just before Danzo set his plan in motion. Hiruzen leaned forward and began to read every line. All the evidence pointed to Danzo's involvement in the attacks on Nathan ever since the Chunin exams. At first, he sent assassins to ambush and kill him. Then, in a bolder move, he funneled intelligence to Kiri, Gakure, enabling their forces to breach the Land of Fire's eastern defenses and slaughter Nathan's support troops. Finally, when Nathan was dispatched to reinforce the Blackstone stronghold, he was betrayed from within and cut down by traitors in his own ranks. Every step of the plot was meticulously documented. On paper, one might argue Danzo was simply eliminating hidden threats to the village. Harsh but necessary measures. Even Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage and head of the Sarutobi clan since the Warring States era, understood the value of ruthless strategy. But when the Hokage learned that Nathan might have awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, everything changed. Danzo's campaign was no longer about protecting the village, it was about seizing Nathan's eyes for his own gain. Mangekyo Sharingan? Hiruzen murmured under his breath. As Hokage, and as the patriarch of a clan renowned through centuries, he knew all too well the legendary power that lay within those scarlet eyes. After all, even Uchiha Madara, whose name still sent shivers through the shinobi world, had once wielded the Mangekyo Sharingan. And if Danzo was willing to kill his own comrades for power, what might he do next? There was once a shinobi bold enough to stand against Hashirama Senju, nay, to rival the god of the ninja world himself. Had Senju not intervened, Nathan might have single-handedly razed the Hidden Leaf village. Though he's not quite that unstoppable now, Danzo's own reckoning suggests that capturing him will be far from simple. Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi has already concluded that Nathan is directly tied to Danzo's death. The ambush squad sent to uncover what really happened has vanished without a trace, and Danzo's final assignment was to hunt Nathan down. With Danzo himself now found dead, the likeliest explanation is that Nathan struck first. Consider what that implies. Danzo led an elite force of Root operatives, each one a lethal weapon in their own right, yet none escaped. Such total dominance speaks volumes about Nathan's present-day power. And if that weren't enough, he commands the loyalty of the entire Uchiha clan. Dealing with a threat like Nathan won't just cost the village, it may well demand everything the Hidden Leaf holds dear. If word ever gets out that Nathan has awakened the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan, the Uchiha will move heaven and earth to shield him, even if it means tearing the village apart from within. After 3 years of constant warfare, Konoha's strength has already slipped to a dangerously low level. A full-blown civil conflict now would be an open invitation for our enemies to strike, and the Hidden Cloud still hasn't signed any ceasefire. Skirmishes flare along our borders every other day. Raising a fuss over Nathan's situation would only risk a major breakout. Yet Hiruzen Sarutobi cannot simply sweep this under the rug. Nathan may not have been beloved by all, but he was a shinobi of the village, and his death, or whatever is happening with his Sharingan, demands at least some official word. To make matters worse, Utatane Koharu and Mitomonen have both been breathing down his neck for answers. Their combined pressure is enough to give any Hokage a headache. Speak of the devil, and he appears. Just then, the Hokage's sliding door creaked open. Just as Hiruzen Sarutobi was lost in thought about long-ago days with his two comrades, the office door slammed open. Utatane Koharu and Mito Kato, and strode in, their eyes blazing with the same fierce determination they'd shown a decade hence, even if now they looked younger and sharper than Hiruzen remembered. No preamble, no courtesy. The moment they crossed the threshold, Koharu demanded, "Hiruzen, tell me straight, was it that Uchiha boy Nathan who killed Danzo?" Hiruzen studied them both for a heartbeat. He wasn't surprised they'd traced the rumors to Nathan. Though Danzo's Anbu root swore fealty to the third Hokage alone, Koharu and Kadoen had quietly planted loyal operatives within its ranks. It made perfect sense, then, that they would follow the bray. D-crumbs back to Nathan. He pinched the bridge of his nose, wariness in his voice. "I'm afraid there's no hard evidence yet." Kadoen's brow furrowed. "No evidence? Then it's only a matter of time before he strikes again." Before Hiruzen could reply, Koharu slammed her hand on his desk. "We can't wait until it's too late. If Nathan is behind Danzo's death, we have to move now, before he disappears." Silence fell. All three knew that without proof, any move might backfire. And yet, Nathan's trail was growing hotter by the hour. Utane Koharu frowned. "Then we notify the Uchiha clan and demand they hand over the suspects. We'll learn the truth at the first hearing." Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, shook his head. "It isn't that simple." He slid a stack of folders across the table. "Look at these." Koharu and Danzo picked up the files. Inside were classified mission logs, Root's covert operations against Nathan, and detailed records of Danzo's secret abductions of ninjas from various clans for experimental research. From the very beginning, Danzo had concealed his actions in the shadows. Exposing them now would ignite a political firestorm. Hiruzen's expression grew grim. "You think we can just bury these records? I'm afraid that's impossible. No system, no matter how tight, can guarantee total secrecy. Even among the Anbu, whose loyalty is legendary, there are those tied by blood to the clans. One slip, one leak, and all of Konoha's darkest deeds would be laid bare. It's far safer to keep this lid firmly shut. As for Nathan, we'll deal with him discreetly, away from prying eyes." Surveying Danzo's final reports and the fallout from the last operation, Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi realized just how rare it was for anyone in Konoha to match or kill someone of Danzo's stature. Even more important, all the evidence showed that Nathan had only defended himself. Danzo's own actions had been reckless. There was simply no solid grounds to brand the Uchiha boy as the aggressor. In fact, Danzo's death posed a far greater problem. Without a credible accusation, Onoki and the other council elders could not justify moving against Nathan without risking chaos in the village. Utatane Koharu and Mitomonen weren't fools. At first, both had been furious at the idea that a mere child from the Uchiha clan might have slain their old friend. But as they pored over the intelligence, their anger gave way to a cold pragmatism. Revenge for Danzo would come at too high a cost if it threatened Konoha's stability, and Hiruzen, they knew, would never allow a reckless vendetta to undermine the village. Yet the sting of injustice still burned in their hearts. At last, Utatane Koharu slammed her hand on the council table. "Are we just going to let that boy walk away without consequences?" Her question hung in the air, met only by stunned silence. In that tense stillness, each of them understood the terrible choice before them, and the even greater storm it might unleash on the hidden leaf. After a long pause, Hiruzen Sarutobi cleared his throat. "First things first, we must clean up Danzo's aftermath." Every operative he placed needs to be exposed and cut off, and any proof of his experimental activities destroyed. Mito Kato, and spoke up abruptly. And Orochimaru? The mission report makes it clear he worked hand-in-hand with Danzo. If we're being fair, he should be detained too. Hiruzen studied him for a moment before replying, I'll keep a close watch on him. His response left no doubt. Orochimaru's past offenses would go unpunished for now, but any future missteps would not be tolerated. Mito Kato-en and Koharu Utatane exchanged knowing looks. As decades-long friends of Hiruzen, they were well acquainted with his temperament. His answer, while predictable, was exactly what they expected. At last, Mitomon-en spoke up. Orochimaru must not be allowed to stand in the fourth Hokage election. En's objection wasn't born of personal envy, but genuine concern for the village's safety in light of Orochimaru's recent actions. When Sarutobi Hiruzen argued this, he listened thoughtfully and then gave a slow nod, an unspoken endorsement of the proposal. In truth, he'd reached the same conclusion long ago. By supporting En now, he was merely giving voice to what he had already believed. Nathan still had no word about what was happening in the village. For now, he focused on assimilating the training experiences and memories each shadow clone had accumulated over the past hour. Meanwhile, his clones kept sharpening their assigned techniques. Some worked on the illusion, darkness walking technique, and the nirvana soul purification technique, while others practiced earth escape, river of earth, and earth escape, heart beheading technique. Progress varied sharply. The illusion and soul purification arts proved stubbornly elusive, their complexity blocking any smooth breakthrough. In contrast, the two earth escape ninjutsu, simpler in structure and built on the rock-solid foundation of earth-style skills Nathan had already mastered, advanced at lightning speed. Most remarkable was the heart beheading technique. In just 1 hour, the clones not only managed to internalize it, but also vaulted significantly closer to level 2. Based on their rate of improvement, Nathan calculated that each point of new proficiency would require 80 chakra. Nathan reviewed his calculations one more time. On average, every single point of proficiency in his earth-style, heart decapitation technique cost him just 80 chakra. Since the maximum rank for a C-rank ninjutsu at level 5 is 400 proficiency points, he would need 32,000 chakra total, well within his daily output. At a steady investment of 40,000 chakra each day, he could master the heart decapitation technique in 7 to 8 days. After that, all of his spare chakra could be funneled into other skills. Next on his list was Earth Style, Earth Flowing River. This ability, classified as a B-rank ninjutsu at level 7, required 100 chakra per proficiency point. With 40,000 chakra poured in daily, Nathan could raise it by 400 points each day, but reaching the upper limit of 1,000 proficiency would still take over a month. By his rough estimate, achieving perfection in Earth Flowing River would demand at least 6 weeks of uninterrupted training. 6 weeks. That felt like an eternity. At Nathan's current rate of growth, not only would his physique attribute climb higher, but his spiritual power would receive another surge once his Manjikyo Sharingan evolved. When that happened, his daily chakra reserves would shoot up dramatically, making even these painstaking calculations feel overly cautious. He closed his notebook, determination flashing in his eyes. Whether it took 7 days or 6 weeks, Nathan was committed to mastering every technique at his disposal and beyond. Nathan realized that his chakra had been redistributed. Any data he'd gathered over the last month and a half was now obsolete. With a quiet shake of his head, he dismissed the thought and opened his eyes. Forming the Ren hand seal, he summoned 8 shadow clones in an instant. Once they'd each been assigned their training regimens, he watched them vanish into the distance. Turning his attention to the book on the Akimichi clan's secret multiplication technique, he opened it to the densely written research notes. As he read, he ran through the motions of the immortal palm technique, experimenting with a subtle shift in his yang release chakra, more energy directed toward fortifying his muscles and bones. In just 1 hour, he couldn't hope for any dramatic breakthroughs, but he wasn't empty-handed. Thanks to the clan's findings, he'd managed to shave a few precious minutes off each application of his palm technique. The improvement was small, and didn't lower his chakra consumption, but it did speed up the process. In Nathan's world, even a sliver of extra time could make all the difference. Nathan could study the book's contents without interrupting his training. Once he'd fully absorbed its teachings, even if he didn't invent any new techniques, he could invest the time saved learning into extra sessions of his palm fairy techniques, an under-the-radar way to accelerate his progress, though it demanded more chakra. But chakra was a resource he could always draw on in an emergency. Shaking off his scattershot, though, Nathan settled his mind and plunged into focused practice. By evening, several hours later, he had successfully enacted his 2 A-rank illusion techniques and accumulated the required chakra to sustain them. Both illusions were structurally similar, and each needed about 120 chakra points per refinement level. Nathan funneled 50,000 chakra into each technique, enough to raise their proficiency by roughly 415 points a day. At that pace, fully perfecting both illusions to a flawless level 900 would take over 200 days. Clearly, that timeline was far too slow. Perhaps it's time I set my sights on capturing a tailed beast, Nathan thought as he reviewed his recent progress. So far, he'd only dealt with 2 A-rank illusions, but mastering the forbidden jutsu he'd acquired from Danzo would demand an enormous chakra investment. Even though his reserves and recovery rate had been steadily improving with each enhancement to his core attributes, the strain was already considerable. He needed new chakra sources, and tailed beasts were the most potent reservoirs he could imagine. Nathan had done his homework. He'd gathered intelligence, honed his skills, and identified his first quarry, the 7 tails of Takigakure. But he couldn't rush in just yet. First, he still knew too little about its current state and needed to conduct further reconnaissance. Second, he had to learn the sealing techniques required to control a captured tailed beast and channel its chakra effectively. And most critically, he had to weather the present storm before making any bold moves. As the old proverb says, one must secure one's own house before confronting the outside world. Nathan wouldn't make his move against the tailed beast until he was absolutely sure the village posed him no threat. Otherwise, he'd simply bide his time. Besides, there was a strategic advantage to waiting. If anything went wrong and someone tried to track him down, he could always rely on the protective umbrella of Konoha, their great tree, standing firmly above him to shield his actions. Despite a lingering whisper urging him to collect 6, Nathan dismissed the notion as improbable. With his current abilities, once he'd pinpointed the beast's location and assessed its condition, he could extract it cleanly and disappear without a trace. Even if Takigakure mounted an inquiry, they'd uncover nothing. In fact, they'd likely bury the incident themselves to keep the village out of the spotlight. That would buy Nathan the time he needed to fully absorb the beast's power. Settling those thoughts, he cut off the daydreams and prepared to practice his final technique, the multiple shadow clone jutsu. It was always the last skill he honed each evening. By now, his chakra reserves were already running low. Nathan concentrated on refining the new clone technique, aware that every moment spent practicing shaved precious seconds off his future battles. Over an hour slipped by in what felt like minutes. At last, he satisfied the final details of the multi-shadow clone technique. With a satisfied nod, he opened his chakra panel and confirmed the 630 proficiency points he had just earned. Wasting no time, Nathan activated 2 of his signature abilities, Wind Release, Wind Wings, and Chakra Feather Cloak. A gentle gust spiraled around him as translucent feather-like chakra wings blossomed from his shoulders. With a soft whoosh, he shot into the night sky, setting his course for Konoha village. As he passed over the dense woods, site of Danzo's recent battle, he paused. Gathering chakra to lift his forehead protectant, he summoned his Byakugan. Pale veins bloomed around his temples as his vision extended beyond the treetops. Below, several figures in black cloaks and masks moved cautiously among the trunks. They paused intermittently, scanning the undergrowth with measured precision. Nathan's eyes narrowed. He recognized the telltale cut of their garments and the silent discipline in their movements, Konoha's Anbu. Their presence here could mean only one thing, to investigate the circumstances of Danzo's death. Satisfied he understood their purpose, Nathan folded away his Byakugan. A faint breeze carried him onward toward the hidden village, his mind already planning the steps he would take once he arrived. Nathan felt a flicker of surprise that Anbu had uncovered this hidden refuge so swiftly. Then again, considering how quickly they'd seized Danzo's root stronghold, it hardly seemed mysterious. Danzo was never careless. He'd undoubtedly scattered backup caches throughout the base, and it was only natural the Anbu operatives would follow those leads here. Of course, by the time they arrived, it was too late. Nathan had already erased every scrap of evidence. Danzo and his root ninjas lay utterly defeated. No trace of them remained. Short of Orochimaru mastering the S-rank forbidden jutsu, reincarnation in the Pure Land, and possessing living cell samples to draw their souls back, no one could ever piece together what happened in this chamber. Their inquiries would amount to little more than fruitless speculation, and in the end, Nathan's secret would remain safe. After watching the bewildered Anbu squad for a moment longer, he vanished without a sound and launched himself toward Konoha's rooftops. Yet even as the wind carried him away, his thoughts lingered on that dreadful forbidden technique and on the very nature of the soul. Nathan knew that at the first opportunity, he must fuse all 7 chakra attributes to forge the Jade of Seeking Tao. Only by doing so could he purify the tainted earthly vessel and strike true at his target's soul. With that resolve burning in his mind, Nathan soared ever higher, and in moments he had vanished from sight. Chapter 669, Confusion. About 30 minutes later, Nathan drifted to the outskirts of Konoha. Once he'd cleared the village's perimeter, he dispelled his wind style, winged flight, and the chakra feather cloak, descending gracefully to the forest floor. Without pause, he strode toward the main gate, this time in his true form. That morning, he'd worn a disguise to slip inside and scavenge for supplies, but today he intended to enter openly. There was no need for subterfuge. His decision sprang from what he'd witnessed earlier. A squad of Anbu operatives had appeared almost instantly, combing the woods as if tipped off. It was obvious that Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi had already put the pieces together. Danzo's death pointed back to him, and had amassed enough intelligence to mount a real search. Nathan wanted to gauge their reaction now that he was unmasked. He felt confident that Hiruzen wouldn't attack without undeniable proof, yet he couldn't dismiss the possibility of a preemptive strike. With each step toward the gate, Nathan braced himself, ready to face whatever verdict Konoha's leadership might pass. He couldn't shake the thought that, with the Hokage's reputation already in shambles, this might be the perfect and perhaps only chance to settle the score for an old friend. In his darkest moments, he even wondered, if someone is bold enough to assassinate the village elder today, what's to stop him from targeting the Hokage tomorrow? A person like that poses a clear danger to the entire village. By taking matters into his own hands now, he could not only absolve himself of guilt, but claim he was safeguarding the village's future. After all, history offered a grim precedent. In the aftermath of the Nine Tails upheaval, it was the Cloud Village emissaries who overstepped first. Yet, in the name of peace, they forced the Hyuga clan to pay a terrible price. Hisashi Hyuga may have volunteered to die in place of his brother Hiyashi, but everyone knew how much of a choice it really was. With his sharp mind, Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi must have anticipated exactly how things would unfold before he laid those terms on the Hyuga. Deep down, he must have known Hisashi would give his life for his family. And now, in light of all that, eliminating this new threat seemed not just justifiable, but necessary. Nathan couldn't shake the suspicion that Hiruzen Sarutobi's vaunted reputation was more style than substance. Of course, that was only speculation. What really mattered was how everyone would react once he returned to the village. A crooked grin flickered across his lips as he considered the worst-case scenario. If things went south, he wouldn't hesitate to turn the tables. After all, the root archives contained every jutsu, illusion, and forbidden technique he could ever need. And with the strength he'd amassed, leaving the hidden leaf would be child's play. Not even Minato Namikaze could catch him if he chose to vanish. He could manufacture a scene, slip away under cover of darkness, and brand himself a rogue shinobi. Yet desertion remained a final resort. It wasn't fear of pursuit that held him back. He could outmaneuver any Leaf search party, even if they dispatched several Cog-level operatives. No, there were two deeper reasons why Nathan refused to abandon Konoha. Nathan paused at the threshold of the Hidden Leaf village, weighing his options. First, life here was stable, no petty distractions, so he could devote himself entirely to his training. Second, if he ever declared himself a rogue shinobi, every bounty hunter, rival village ninja hungry for his bloodline, and dark underworld faction would descend on him the moment word got out. The mere thought made his head ache. Better, he decided, to stay under Konoha's protective wing if the village would have him. Night had already fallen. Though the village gate stood open, it was nearly deserted. This section of the perimeter lay far from the bustling market and was swallowed by darkness. Only a single lantern swung overhead, casting a dim glow on the two ninja guards who kept watch. Birth by birth, Nathan stepped into the pool of light, determined to learn what fate the Hidden Leaf would choose for him. Nathan stepped through Konohagakure's massive stone gates, offering a casual nod to the two ninja posted as sentries. They returned his greeting with barely disguised stiffness, their shoulders stiff, fingers brushing instinctively toward their blades. Nathan paused for a heartbeat, eyes scanning the bustling street before him. No ambush, he decided, shaking off the prickling tension at the back of his neck. He resisted the urge to remove the guardian seal between his brows and awaken his Byakugan. He'd already incurred the Hokage family's wrath once. He had no wish to provoke the Hyuga clan as well. If his ocular power betrayed him here, not even the Uchiha might be able to come to his rescue. Settling his shoulders, Nathan relaxed into a steady stride and pressed on down the avenue. 100 meters from the gate, long shadows rippled in the alleys on either side. Before he could react, two figures dropped into the street. Clad in obsidian robes with featureless masks, Anbu operatives flanked him, their chakra flaring just enough to mark them unmistakably as elite shinobi. They bore down on him without a word, sealing Nathan's path forward. Nathan studied the two silent figures before him. He'd never worked closely with Anbu operatives, so he couldn't place their identities, but at least there were only two of them. The worst hadn't happened. Nothing more ominous was waiting in the shadows. He squared his shoulders and forced a puzzled expression. Anbu, huh? Is there something you need from me? He asked, his voice calm. Neither of the masked ninjas flinched. Beneath the shadows of their hoods, their eyes remained unreadable. After a brief, measured pause, the taller one finally spoke. Jonin Nathan, he said, the third Hokage requests your immediate presence. Please come with us. Nathan kept his expression neutral. He didn't rise or bow. Instead, he asked quietly, Do you have a warrant? For the first time, a hint of uncertainty flickered in their gazes. The two Anbu shared a quick, tense look, then remembered. Of course, any order from the Hokage required proper authorization. One of them reached back beneath his cloak. Forgive our oversight, he said, producing a folded parchment stamped with the Hokage's seal. Allow us. Nathan nodded once and accepted the document. His eyes scanned the paper with the precision of a seasoned shinobi. Now that everything was in order, he gathered his composure and prepared to follow. Wait a second, Sakura said, brows knitting in concern. If enemy shinobi ever learned how to forge Anbu credentials, they could stroll right into the village under false pretenses. That would be a catastrophe. Nathan leaned back in his seat, nodding. Precisely why we need a second layer of security, a written warrant directly signed by the Hokage. It not only serves as insurance against forgeries, but also limits Anbu authority to missions the Hokage explicitly approves. Shikamaru tapped the table thoughtfully. But until now, when Anbu operatives entered the village, they always carried the implicit backing of the Hokage, so no one ever questioned them. Nathan gave a wry smile. That worked when there was mutual trust and transparency. But remember the Yamato rescue? When Kakashi needed to pull him out of enemy territory, Hiruzen Sarutobi issued a special order and handed it to Danzo. The moment Danzo held that warrant, it became equivalent to a personal command from the Hokage. Sakura's eyes widened, and Danzo had no choice but to comply. Exactly. Nathan's tone turned serious. Danzo was only an advisory elder, but refusing a direct order undermines the Hokage's authority. In this power network, anyone who defies a Hokage's warrant risks losing every ally, everyone will instinctively reject and even oppose you. So what seems like a small procedural detail actually carries enormous weight. Shikamaru leaned forward. I see. Without that written authorization, an Ambu squad, even if they claim to be on official business, could be shut down the moment suspicion arises. Nathan nodded firmly. That's why from now on, every Anbu mission must be accompanied by the Hokage's signed warrant. No exceptions. Sakura exchanged a glance with Shikamaru, both absorbing how a simple piece of paper could wield such power. In that moment, the importance of formal authorization became crystal clear, and Nathan's insistence no longer seemed surprising, but absolutely necessary. Nathan watched their expressions shift and knew he was right. They didn't have a warrant. With that confirmation, he saw no reason to cooperate. If they chose to press the issue later, he'd simply abide by the proper procedures then. Chapter 670, Confrontation. Nathan paused halfway down the corridor, his brow furrowing as he looked between the two Ambu agents. No warrant? Sorry, I have other business, he said with a hint of regret. I'll be going now. He slid between them and took a couple of steps forward, but before he could get far, they vanished in a flash of movement, reappearing to block his path once more. Nathan stopped short, the easy smile vanishing from his face. What? He said coolly, tone now edged with warning. Is there something else you need? The agents, instantly alert to the shift in his attitude, brushed past the question of a warrant. One of them folded his arms and spoke in a low, firm voice. The third has personally ordered you to report to the Hokage's office as soon as you return to the village. He has questions for you. Hokage's office. It was as secure a summons as any. Not an arrest, not an outright ambush, just an official request. But Nathan's eyes narrowed. A simple meeting place didn't guarantee simple answers. He took a slow, deliberate breath, preparing himself for whatever awaited him in the highest chamber of the village. Nathan refused to feel like a common criminal, forced to answer questions he didn't want to hear, despite the fact that he had just slain Danzo. He fixed his gaze on the two Ambu operatives, daring them to press their insinuations. Instead of replying to their veiled accusations, he cut straight to the point. In other words, you still don't have a warrant from the Hokage. The two agents exchanged a wary, wordless glance. Nathan took a step forward. Instantly, both Ambu sprang in unison, half a pace closer, making it clear they had no intention of yielding. Without the slightest hesitation, Nathan's eyes flashed scarlet as he activated his Sharingan. 3 dark, swirling tomoi blossomed in each iris, and an invisible wave of chakra radiated outward, intent on subduing them. But these were Ambu, elites trained to face even the most dangerous genjutsu. On reflex, they tensed, leaped back, and created breathing room between themselves and Nathan. Then, as one, they slid into position, one on the left side of the street, the other on the right, their stances mirroring each other, like the horns of a mighty beast poised to gore. The tension between all 3 jonin crackled in the air. Chakra currents rippled outward, making the atmosphere feel heavy and solid, as if the very air itself conspired to choke anyone who dared stand in their way. The night sounds around them, from the chirping insects to the whispering breeze, fell abruptly silent, as if some invisible hand had clamped the world's throat. Time stretched on, each second a hammer blow against the 2 root ninja standing before Nathan. Though he had yet to move, both men were already slick with sweat. They had heard the stories, Nathan's daring missions, the countless dossiers filed under his name, and they had pored over every scrap of intelligence they could find. They weren't the weakest jonin in the village, not by a long shot, but they had never truly understood the weight of Nathan's reputation until this moment, face to face with him in the dark. When Nathan first mentioned his warrant, the pair realized immediately that this mission would spiral out of control. They'd already signaled for backup the moment Nathan spoke. Now their only option was to stall, delay long enough for the Ambu to arrive. After all, this was Konoha. Even someone like Nathan wouldn't dare unleash his full strength against village shinobi, would he? As they exchanged tense, pleading glances, the stillness was broken by hurried, chaotic footsteps echoing through the forest. Reinforcements, or so they hoped, were finally on their way. The distant rumble of approaching footsteps grew louder until it filled the narrow street, hemming in the 3 figures locked in confrontation. At first, the two Ambu operatives allowed themselves a flicker of hope. Surely it was their reinforcements arriving. But as the newcomers drew near, they realized their mistake. The were members of the Konoha Guard, their armor marked with the unmistakable Uchiha clan crest. Under their masks, the Ambu agents' expressions hardened. The Uchiha held the numerical advantage here, and if they intended to seize Nathan, there was nothing the two of them could do to stop it. Heartbeats quickened as they weighed their dwindling options, when suddenly a soft swish of fabric drew their attention. A second wave of figures materialized from the shadows, each clad in the same black robes and bird-like masks as the first two. Ambu reinforcements had arrived. The original pair let out a silent sigh of relief. Yet even with their allies at their backs, the balance of power remained against them. The Uchiha still outnumbered their force. After a tense moment of silence, the highest-ranking Uchiha on site finally spoke. Nathan recognized him as one of the deputy captains of the Konoha Guard, of the same generation as Uchiha Fugaku, the clan's current head, though he'd never caught his name. While Fugaku held the title of captain, he left most duties to deputies like this man. The deputy captain studied Nathan intently and asked, "All right, what happened here?" Nathan didn't hold back. He explained that a squad of Anbu operatives had shown up out of nowhere, insisting on taking him to see the Hokage, but they hadn't produced any warrant or official summons. At once, the assembled Uchiha exchanged confused glances. A few of the younger shinobi even murmured about whether an order from the Hokage wasn't required in writing. The deputy captain, however, simply frowned. He knew something was off. Otherwise, Nathan wouldn't be so adamant about the lack of formal authorization. Nathan stared at the hastily scrawled notice tacked to the security division's bulletin board. A whisper from that morning kept echoing in his mind. Advisor Danzo Shimura had been killed by one of his own. The rumor had rippled through the village before the elders stamped it down by midday. Nathan had dismissed it as idle chatter. Now, he wasn't so sure. He glanced at the Ambu operatives standing nearby, their black masks unreadable. Beside them, Deputy Captain Kurosu of the Security Division watched him closely, his expression grave. Nathan felt the weight of those silent eyes boring into him. Had they noticed the flicker of alarm in his face? Probably. And if Danzo's assassination, and worse, betrayal from within, was real, this was only the beginning. Nathan allowed himself a moment to sort through the possibilities. If the rumor had any truth to it, then every official order summoning him might be a trap. The seal on this Ambu request already looked suspiciously off, just enough to justify their intervention and derail any later claim. A bold plan began to form in his mind, but he refused to voice it out loud. Not yet. Deputy Captain Kurosu stepped forward. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to return you to your clan immediately," he said quietly, eyes flicking between Nathan and the waiting operatives. "Technically, Ambu slipped up in the protocols, but it's our best cover. If word reaches the Hokage and he issues an arrest warrant, we'll be caught flat-footed." Nathan met Kurosu's gaze and nodded. He'd go along, at least for now. Every move from here on would have to be calculated. If the shadows had grown this deep, he intended to lead them into the light. As soon as the deputy captain reached his decision, he turned to the Ambu squad before him and said, "Everything's been settled. Dismiss yourselves. There'll be plenty of time to resume the search once we have the Hokage's warrant." Without waiting for protest, he gave a quick nod and a knowing wink to the Uchiha Jonin standing beside him, then strode off with Nathan at his side. Two Ambu operatives moved to block their path, but in that instant, several Uchiha Jonin flashed their 3-tome Sharingan. One by one, the rest of their comrades activated theirs as well, encircling the hesitant Ambu in a silent, unbreakable ring. Even these shadow-trained warriors felt a chill under so many unblinking eyes. The lead Ambu finally raised a hand. No attack would come today, and signaled his team to stand down. Still, the tension lingered. Word of this confrontation would sweep through the village before long, and every household, clan by clan, would have something to say about it. None of this concerns Nathan. He's currently accompanying the deputy captain of the security division to the residence of Uchiha clan leader Fugaku Uchiha. Chapter 6771, Contemplation and Discovery. Nathan and the deputy captain soon arrived at Fugaku Uchiha's estate. In stark contrast to the modest courtyard Nathan's parents had left behind, Fugaku's residence was the very picture of opulence. As patriarch of the Uchiha clan, he occupied the grandest property in the heart of the district, a sprawling compound of pavilions and towers, artfully arranged rock gardens, and winding streams. They strolled along a gravel path for several minutes, crossed a gently rippling pond by way of an arched stone bridge, and finally reached the doors of the reception hall. An Uchiha retainer stepped forward and ushered them inside. The deputy captain offered Nathan a brief introduction before bowing out and returning to his duties. Once the door closed, the retainer presented Nathan with a delicate porcelain cup of tea. "Lord Fugaku is entangled in urgent affairs at the moment," he explained politely. "He will see you shortly. Please, make yourself comfortable." Nathan inclined his head in acknowledgement, anticipating only a brief wait. But minutes stretched on. One cup of tea became 2, then 3, and still Fugaku Uchiha did not appear. Nathan set his empty cup aside and leaned back, mind racing as he considered what might be keeping the clan patriarch so long. Nathan watched the Uchiha servant pour him a 4th cup of tea and asked bluntly, "How much longer until the clan leader arrives?" The young man set the teapot aside and met Nathan's gaze evenly. "Lord Fugaku is occupied at the moment, sir. He will see you as soon as he is free. Please wait a little longer." Nathan's expression hardened. The slave's calm, unflinching delivery only fueled his impatience, and for a moment Nathan felt the familiar pull behind his eyes. Sharingan, ready to ignite. Still, the servant, though not a shinobi, stood unmoved under the silent threat. After refilling Nathan's cup, he retreated to the wall and remained motionless like a carved statue. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Had the Uchiha sent him an unmistakable warning? Every fiber of his being screamed that this was a show of power. "I can keep you waiting, and there's nothing you can do about it." Yet as he studied the servant's calm posture, Nathan hesitated. If this were pure intimidation, the man's hands would shake, his voice would show strain. But there was none, only polite composure. Drawing on memories from his previous life, Nathan recalled Lord Uchiha Fugaku's reputation. Firm when he must be, yes, but easily swayed by stronger wills. Indecisive at times, too courteous, always polite even when he meant to wield authority. So perhaps this wasn't a challenge at all, or not entirely. Taking a measured sip of his tea, Nathan leaned back and let his eyes stray to the courtyard beyond the sliding doors, considering his next move. After the Nine Tails Rebellion, the leadership of Konoha decided, ostensibly for the greater good, to relocate the Uchiha clan's territory from the bustling heart of the village to a remote outlying district. Nathan, as a senior official, had no choice but to carry out the order. What seemed like a minor administrative move instead drove a wedge between the village and one of its most influential clans, setting the stage for deeper resentment. Isolated and increasingly resented, the Uchiha chafed under their new circumstances. Before long, a faction of clan elders drafted a formal petition demanding Nathan's support for a coup d'etat. Though he fully understood that any uprising against the Hokage's government stood virtually no chance of success, Nathan found himself swayed by the sheer force of collective will. What ought to have been a quiet refusal turned into acquiescence, proof, as he would later admit to himself, of his own fatal weakness for external pressure. In the weeks that followed, Nathan's indecision only deepened. Instead of swift, decisive planning, the conspirators were mired in endless council meetings and shifting loyalties. Nathan knew the key to any successful rebellion was secrecy and speed. The fewer people privy to the plan, the more likely it would remain undetected. The more sudden the strike, the less time for loyalist forces to rally. Yet, every time he prepared to give the final order, another round of debate stalled his resolve. In these drawn-out deliberations lay the clearest evidence of his tragic flaw, a leader unable to seize the moment. Why did he have to broadcast it so openly, as if he feared the village hadn't already heard? It was absurd, and his ability to judge people was clearly flawed. He let personal feelings cloud his reasoning. During the coup, he placed far too much trust in his son, a blind faith that ultimately became the breaking point. If it hadn't been for Uchiha Itachi's intervention, even a failed rebellion wouldn't have led to the entire clan's destruction. At worst, the ordinary Uchiha would have been confined under strict guard, isolated, watched, and gradually absorbed back into the village or left to wither away, much like the remnants of the Senju. Killing every last one of them would have been both politically unnecessary and far too brutal. And what was this about Sasuke still being alive? Sparing his brother at the cost of an entire clan's fate was neither mercy nor honor. It was reckless selfishness. Sasuke's existence wasn't a gracious pardon. It was a tool for Konoha to keep Uchiha Itachi under their thumb. Nathan had once been the kind of fan who, watching those comic movie portrayals of Uchiha Itachi's selfless sacrifices for his brother, would cheer Itachi-sama at the screen. But now, reborn into this world as a member of the Uchiha clan, his own future hanging in the balance, he felt nothing but cold indifference toward Itachi. If their world lines were connected, Nathan would have eliminated the elder Uchiha the moment he set foot in the village. Still, when he uncovered the Sharingan's subtle illusion technique known as darkness walking, he wasted no time mastering it. Clearly, he could not fully trust the so-called traitor. Memories of his recent meeting with Uchiha Fugaku churned in his mind. Fugaku's parting words and demeanor hinted at something far more than a mere show of power. Nathan was certain of it. Only one explanation remained. Fugaku was probing the morning's rumors in Konoha, trying to learn whether Nathan was behind them. If that was true, Nathan needed to gather every shred of information he could before their next encounter, so that he, not Fugaku, would hold the advantage. Nathan shrugged off his hesitation and began to practice openly. Yet he resisted the temptation to immediately delve into the reflection of the heart technique. His own method, though rooted in the Uchiha ancestors' original reflection of the heart, had evolved considerably. Still, the lineage was unmistakable. If Uchiha Fugaku ever examined it, he might uncover traces of those ancient principles. The chance was slim. Fugaku and his son both possessed extraordinary talent and standing, and would likely dismiss any mortal claim to rival their heritage, but Nathan preferred to err on the side of caution. He had no desire to reveal his secret ability to mass-produce the Mangekyo Sharingan before he'd sealed his own invincibility. Better to master his techniques in private than to hand an advantage to potential rivals. With that resolve firmly in place, Nathan set aside his doubts and immersed himself wholly in disciplined training. Nathan wasn't entirely alone. Concealed both in plain sight and in the shadows were several Uchiha shinobi. Although none matched the natural talent of Uchiha Fugaku, they might have learned the reflection heart technique early, just as their predecessors had in their previous lives, making it all too possible they could identify him. To be safe, Nathan returned to his palm immortal technique, determined to fortify his body further. He opened the guidebook again and carefully studied the sections on yang-released chakra. With each practice session, he fine-tuned the flow of yang energy through his meridians, searching for ever greater efficiency. Whether it was his growing mastery of the palm immortal technique, the latent human control ability that let him dominate his own physiology, or the hidden proficiency bonuses he'd unlocked, his progress was astonishingly smooth. Every attempt brought unmistakable improvements. At this pace, Nathan calculated, he'd hit the crucial threshold of bodily transformation in no more than 3 or 4 days, far sooner than the 5 or 6 he'd originally anticipated. His heart swelled with excitement at the thought. Redoubling his focus, he poured every ounce of energy into his training as the minutes slipped by. Nathan sat unmoved as the village's hushed rhythms throbbed beyond his window. Before he realized it, more than 2 hours had slipped away, and night had deepened around him. Chapter 672, Inquiry. A soft creak announced the door's opening. Uchiha Fugaku stepped into the reception hall, the polished wood floorboards whispering beneath his polished boots. The lone servant standing by stiffened into attention, then hurried forward to bow deeply. "Master Clan Leader," the servant greeted him. Fugaku's gaze barely registered the formality. With a single dismissive wave, he signaled the servant to withdraw. The young retainer retreated at once, his footsteps echoing down the corridor until they faded away. Fugaku crossed the room and settled into the seat of honor. He reached for the porcelain teacup before him, poured a measured stream of dark, steaming tea, and lifted it to his lips. Only then did he turn his attention to Nathan, who sat opposite him, absorbed in his work. Nathan didn't pause or even look up. He'd felt Fugaku's presence the moment the door opened, but his experiment was at a critical tipping point. He was on the verge of a breakthrough and dared not lose focus. The faint clink of tea against china went unnoticed as Fugaku watched him in silence. Nathan sheltered his surprise and kept his focus, channeling the yang escape chakra through every fiber of his body. He methodically strengthened each organ and cell, recalibrating his inner energy. A minute later, he finally opened his eyes and caught the glance of Uchiha Fugaku. "How's your progress?" Fugaku asked coolly. Nathan feigned surprise, snapping to his feet. "Yes, clan leader." Fugaku held up a hand, motioning him back down. "Sit." Nathan lowered himself into the chair at Fugaku's right. "Thank you, clan leader." Fugaku leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You were completely absorbed just now. Tell me, you made a breakthrough?" Nathan nodded confidently. "I worked through a few sticking points. My palm immortal technique is now 10% more efficient." Fugaku allowed a faint nod. 10% might seem small, but for Nathan it was a solid start, and proof that his efforts were paying off. Nathan sensed that by following this line of reasoning, he could easily double or even triple his overall training efficiency. Of course, such gains wouldn't happen overnight, but he was confident he could trim the time needed for his next physical breakthrough by a full third. That would be monumental. Every time his physique stat increased, it took him months to reach the next critical transformation. Cutting 1 or 2 months off each cycle would be a game-changer. As Nathan quietly reviewed these insights, Uchiha Fugaku spoke up again. He didn't probe Nathan for details. He knew better than to pry into someone else's private progress, and he offered no pointers on training. After all, Nathan was now his equal. Both were jonin, both top-tier warriors, and Fugaku's years of experience wouldn't let him tutor such a prodigy. So he merely watched, his amusement unspoken but unmistakable. Fugaku smoothly steered their conversation toward Nathan's parents from his previous life. He began by praising the tremendous contributions they'd made to their clan, then lamented the tragedy of their untimely deaths, and finally asked Nathan to share what life had been like for him back then. On the surface, it was a simple discussion of family matters, but Fugaku had a purpose in mind. He wanted to observe Nathan's character, his sense of duty, and how he spoke of his lost loved ones. Nathan wasn't in the least unsettled. He answered each question calmly and honestly. To most people, their exchange might have seemed trivial, but Fugaku saw deeper. Nathan was undoubtedly powerful, but still just a teenager. In a few years, he'd be thrust onto the battlefield day after day, with little opportunity to learn anything beyond strategy and combat. Given Nathan's solitary nature and his relentless dedication to practice, Fugaku believed he could easily gauge the boy's strengths and weaknesses through such small talk. What Fugaku didn't know was that inside Nathan's youthful body dwelled the soul of a mature adult, an experience that would be far harder to read than any teenager's. Nathan had lived a previous life purely as an observer, someone with no formal experience in government, no polished manners, yet decades older than most around him. He grew up in an era of high-speed internet, binge-watching films and dramas, so when faced with Uchiha Fugaku's probing questions, he stayed perfectly calm. Above all, his overwhelming strength gave him the confidence to take risks. Worst-case scenario, they'd simply end the meeting and walk away. After a careful half-hour of tea and small talk, Nathan realized Fugaku wasn't uncovering anything useful. He decided to change tactics. "Let's talk about Danzo," he said, leaning forward. He recounted the darker rumors swirling around Danzo, possible links to the disappearance of several Uchiha shinobi, and made clear his own unease. Then, in a neutral tone, he added, "Am I yourself under scrutiny for any of this?" Fugaku's eyes flickered, but he offered nothing beyond a quiet shake of the head. Nathan inclined his own in acknowledgement, confident that he'd steered the conversation exactly where he wanted. Uchiha Fugaku studied Nathan's expression for a moment, then cut straight to the chase. "Were you involved in Danzo's death?" Fugaku already knew Danzo was dead, and he suspected Nathan's recent run-in with the Anbu wasn't coincidental. Nathan feigned surprise. "What? Elder Danzo's dead? Who did it?" Fugaku's eyes narrowed. "You're asking if I killed him?" Nathan shook his head so vigorously, his shoulders rattled. That's impossible. Fugaku remained calm. Then why did you refuse to go with the Anbu? Nathan met Fugaku's gaze evenly. They didn't follow proper procedure. Fugaku frowned, recognizing Nathan's attempt to stonewall. Silence settled over the living room for a long moment before Fugaku finally exhaled. Very well, if you've turned down the third Hokage's summons, we'll let it drop, at least for now. I'll handle the negotiations with the third Hokage myself. Nathan froze, surprised by Uchiha Fugaku's unexpected offer. After all, he'd been openly uncooperative, yet here was the clan leader, stepping forward to take responsibility. If Fugaku truly enjoyed the loyalty of the Uchiha Shinobi, there had to be a reason he'd been chosen as their head. Just as Nathan turned to leave, Fugaku's voice stopped him. Have you awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan? In an instant, Fugaku's eyes transformed, the three Magatama blazing in each iris. A suffocating pressure rolled over Nathan, stronger than any ordinary Sharingan he'd ever faced. Even so, he knew that against a fully matured Mangekyo, his own ocular power would still fall short. Nathan had by now become almost certain that his opponent hadn't awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Barring a sudden breakthrough in the next few years, or on the night of the Uchiha massacre, the outcome of their confrontation was already sealed. A storm of thoughts raced through Nathan's mind as he felt the pressure of his opponent's mental onslaught. Instinctively, he tensed and activated his own Sharingan, revealing the full three-tomoe pattern. Even in this restrained state, his eyes glowed with greater intensity than his adversaries. He deliberately restrained the true power hidden within his pupils, showing just enough strength to leave his opponent with hope. As head of the Uchiha clan, Nathan knew his father, Fugaku, understood how precious a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan was to their family's future. By offering that faint glimmer, even under Konoha's relentless scrutiny, Fugaku would be forced to stand his ground. For 3 silent, charged seconds, their crimson eyes locked, each measuring the other, before both shinobi finally lowered their gaze and deactivated their Sharingan. Nathan gave a respectful bow. Yes, Patriarch. Uchiha Fugaku's eyes never wavered from him. It's very late. Go back and rest. As Nathan turned, he caught a flicker of movement behind Fugaku, just the faintest unevenness in the reception room's stone wall. He forced himself to keep walking, but his pulse quickened at the sound of distant footsteps. Tap, tap, tap. Nathan slipped through the doorway and disappeared down the corridor. No sooner had the sound of his retreating footsteps faded than Fugaku's voice cut through the silence. Come out. The panel in the wall swung inward on concealed hinges. A small figure stepped into the dimly lit room, smooth black hair framing a face that, though no more than 4 or 5 years old, already carried a sharp, calculating gaze. It was the Uchiha heir, Itachi. He stood in the threshold, his young features composed beyond his years. His dark eyes followed the path Nathan had taken. Father? Itachi asked quietly. Did he kill him? Fugaku's lips curled into a faint, inscrutable smile. What do you think? He replied. Itachi's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but he spoke no more. The patriarch turned away, and the chamber door slid shut behind them, leaving only shadows and unspoken secrets in its wake. Uchiha Itachi fell silent for a moment, considering his father's words. Finally, he said, even if he didn't kill that person personally, he must still be involved. Fugaku Uchiha smiled and nodded approvingly. Exactly. He did kill him. Itachi frowned. Why do you say that? You don't know Nathan as I do, Fugaku replied. If you look at his file, you'll see he's the type who places absolute faith in his own strength, and he's exceptionally patient. When someone like him runs into trouble, his impulse is always to rely on himself. Even if he lacks the power he needs at first, he will wait in the shadows, training and growing until the moment comes to strike. He doesn't lean on others, he trusts only in his own abilities. He paused, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Besides, we have reports that Danzo attacked Nathan and another Uchiha operative several times over the past 2 years. If there was ever an occasion for revenge, that would be it. By now, Nathan's strength would be more than enough to finish the job. Itachi regarded his father with a new respect. Fugaku's assessment was spot on. Nathan trusted nobody but himself, and his growing power had indeed reached the level necessary to settle old scores. Nathan would never ask for outside help. If he'd convinced Uchiha Shisui to join him this time, he might have ended the skirmish without ever unleashing his Mangekyo Sharingan. But Nathan refuses to rely on anyone else. He'd risk exposing his own power before stooping to teamwork, a clear sign he trusts only himself. Itachi's ears perked up at his father's mention of another ally. "Why can't Nathan and Shisui join forces?" he asked. "Shisui's being targeted by Danzo too. He's no outsider. Surely they'd have a better chance together." "No," Fugaku said firmly, shaking his head. "Their temperaments clash. Shisui loves the village and honors rules and order far more than Nathan ever could. They simply wouldn't cooperate." "Rules and order?" Itachi's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Who is this person, father?" Fugaku studied his son's eager expression, then decided to indulge him. "His name is Uchiha Shisui. He's only a few years older than you. Maybe you should wait until he's free before you go looking for him," Fugaku advised his son. Nathan didn't know anything about that conversation. He was already halfway home when it happened, his mind on the day's events. The late afternoon sun was dipping low as he turned onto the street leading to his house. Just before he reached his front gate, he spotted a figure standing in the distance, someone he recognized. It wasn't Shisui, as he'd briefly hoped, but Uchiha Haruto, the young shinobi he'd met only a few days ago. Haruto stood motionless, his dark hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Nathan paused, surprise and curiosity mingling on his face. Why was Haruto here, and what did he want? As Nathan closed the distance, he braced himself for answers. Chapter 673, one after another. Nathan froze at the street corner, staring into the dim glow of a lone street lamp. A solitary figure waited there, motionless. "Looking for someone?" he asked. The man stepped forward out of the shadows, Haruto Uchiha, his face inscrutable. He offered no explanation for Nathan's question, only met his gaze with equal intensity. In fact, Haruto was certain Nathan had expected him, otherwise, why lurk here in the middle of the night? Without preamble, he went straight to the point. "I'm not the one calling you," he said quietly. "The Great Elder requested your presence." Nathan's heart skipped. "The Great Elder?" He shook his head in disbelief. "The only elder I've ever met is Firespin, and he's not the clan's Great Elder. We've never even spoken. Why would the Great Elder want to see me now?" Haruto said nothing more. The night air seemed to tighten around them, charged with unspoken questions, and the promise of answers yet to come. Nathan's mind raced as he followed Uchiha Haruto through the silent streets. "Is this about Danzo again?" he wondered. Haruto didn't hesitate. "Yes," he replied quietly. "The Great Elder requests your presence." At the mention of Danzo, Nathan's suspicions were confirmed. If anyone stood to gain from stirring up trouble, it was him. Yet the murkier the politics, the better Nathan liked it. So he nodded and fell into step beside Haruto. Without another word, they changed course and headed deeper into Uchiha territory. They passed beyond the well-lit homes of clan leaders, farther than Nathan had ever ventured before, until at last they reached a secluded courtyard nestled among towering cedars. Though the grounds were large, only a handful of torches burned along the gravel paths, and fewer still of the Great Elder's attendants lingered at this late hour. The hush of midnight wrapped around them like a shroud, broken only by the soft crunch of their footsteps on stone. "We've arrived," Haruto announced, his voice barely above a whisper. Nathan gave a curt nod and let Haruto take the lead. Haruto paused at the heavy oaken door, pressed his palm against its lacquered surface in a formal stance, then rapped 3 times in measured succession. Knock, knock, knock. Inside, the silence held for a heartbeat. Then an ancient, gravelly voice called out, "Enter." Nathan exchanged a glance with Haruto, steeling himself for what awaited beyond the threshold. "Come in." Haruto Uchiha inclined his head to Nathan and pushed the door open. The wood creaked under his hand as he stepped inside, followed closely by Nathan. They entered a modest study furnished with a single desk, a few chairs, and rows of bookshelves packed with ancient tomes. Seated behind the desk was an elderly man whose lined face and silver hair marked him as someone well advanced in years. He reclined in his chair, eyes closed, brow knit in quiet contemplation. Haruto and Nathan approached the desk. Haruto paused and spoke with measured respect. "Great Elder, they have arrived." At the mention of his title, the old man's eyes opened. The moment their gazes met, Nathan felt a subtle weight settle over him. Not a psychic assault, but the innate authority of someone accustomed to commanding others. Having faced danger and death on the battlefield for over 2 years, Nathan kept his composure, returning the elder's inspection with calm confidence. The great elder surveyed him from head to toe, his gaze sharp and assessing. The great elder's expression was as inscrutable as ever, but a hint of approval flickered in his eyes as he nodded. "Not bad," he said quietly. Then he turned to the Uchiha standing beside him. "Haruto, you're dismissed. You may go." "Yes, great elder," Haruto Uchiha replied with a respectful bow. Without another word, he slipped out of the chamber, the door clicking shut behind him. Once they were alone, the elder's gaze fell squarely on Nathan. "Nathan, you've proven yourself quite remarkable," he began, his voice warm but measured. "You know, I've been observing you for some time. After your parents passed, I assigned Jurito to keep a close watch on you." He paused and studied Nathan's face. "I wanted to see whether the shock would trigger your Sharingan, but you didn't awaken it, at least not until your inheritance came through. I have to admit, that was disappointing." Nathan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't realized the extent to which the great elder had monitored him, and now that insight stirred a quiet fear deep within him. They gave up too soon. If they'd kept a Jonin watching me around the clock, there was no way my secret could have stayed hidden. And even if they never uncovered the proficiency panel, they'd surely notice the sudden jump in my strength. Who knows what would happen then? They might anoint me a prodigy and subject me to endless training, or even probe my memories to hunt for irregularities. Either way, I'd lose control of my own destiny. All I can say is, lucky break. I arrived in this timeline late enough, and the panel only increases my power in measured stages. Otherwise, I could be in real trouble right now. Nathan forced his expression to stay calm, hiding the turmoil in his heart. Just then, the great elder's voice brightened with excitement. "Well done. Truly, you haven't let me down. In the end, you awakened your Sharingan and lost control." The elder's eyes gleamed as he leaned forward. "Do you know what that really means?" Nathan stiffened. "I heard from the clan that you've been making breakthrough after breakthrough on the battlefield, that your Sharingan reached 3 tomoe in just 1 year. I was thrilled. It proved my instincts were correct." "No, your instincts couldn't be more off," Nathan thought. Without the proficiency panels, there's no way he'd have unlocked even 1 tomoe, let alone 3. The original owner of his body would have celebrated just gaining a single tomoe. "So, Nathan," the elder pressed, a sly smile playing on his lips, "have you awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan yet?" Nathan blinked in surprise. Why would that even come up? Before he could think twice, the elder snapped his eyes open, revealing the 3 tomoe pattern flickering in both irises, just like Uchiha Fugaku had done not long ago. It was a deliberate provocation, meant to push Nathan to reveal his true power. Nathan suppressed an exasperated sigh. They really were cut from the same cloth. Even their methods were identical. Nathan sensed that, though the elder was advanced in years and lacked the stamina to sustain a high-intensity ocular assault for long, the burst of power he could unleash in a moment easily outmatched Uchiha Fugaku's. Of course, without the Mangekyo Sharingan awakened, Nathan couldn't gauge the true extent of the difference. He simply braced himself and endured the pressure the elder was exerting. Just as he had when confronting Fugaku, Nathan's Sharingan power remained only marginally stronger than his opponent's. At first, the elder's eyes lit with surprise and delight as he realized Nathan's chakra projection exceeded his own. But the moment he noticed that Nathan's Sharingan bore only 3 tomoe, his expression froze. "This can't be," he muttered, voice tight with disbelief. "You haven't awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, so how did you kill Danzo?" Nathan met the elder's astonished glare without flinching. "I didn't kill Danzo." Not a soul stood nearby, yet the elder's posture and tone betrayed his true colors. He was clearly aligned with the most hardline faction of the Uchiha clan, the ones who demanded proof of power above all else. Even if he confessed, Danzo would swear to secrecy, and yet his verdict stood fast. Nathan refused to admit he'd killed anyone. The great elder may not have believed him, but that wasn't his primary concern just now. He wanted to amplify Nathan's ocular power and push him to his breaking point. Unfortunately, age was catching up with him. He simply couldn't sustain that explosive chakra surge for more than a few breaths. With a final crackle of energy, his aura collapsed. The great elder sank back into his throne-like chair and fixed Nathan with a scrutinizing gaze, lingering over the 3 Magatama Tomoe spinning in his eye. "You're seriously telling me you still haven't awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan?" he demanded, his voice edged with disbelief. "No." Nathan's reply was calm but unyielding. A shadow of disappointment flickered across the elder's lined face. He had already compared Nathan's strength to Danzo's and concluded that only the Mangekyo Sharingan could account for such overwhelming power, the kind that could slay Danzo and his entire cadre in an instant. Yet Nathan's eyes remained unchanged, his secret still intact. He had never been so uncertain. Nathan's ocular power had already surpassed anything he'd witnessed before, and he seemed to use it with effortless mastery. How strong had he become? Perhaps strong enough to take down Danzo and his entire guard without ever unlocking the Mangekyo Sharingan. After a moment's tense silence, the great elder banished his doubts. Nathan was still so young. Whether or not he'd awakened the Mangekyo, there would be time for that later. There was no need to force it now. Leaning back, the great elder exhaled fully, then fixed Nathan with a steady gaze. "If you truly haven't awakened it, then you haven't. From this point on, ignore the Hokage's summons. The clan will handle any calls for you. Your sole concern is your training." He reached beneath his desk, opened a drawer, and withdrew a slim parchment. Handing it to Nathan, he said, "Here, my personal authorization. With this pass, you'll have unrestricted travel wherever you need to go." "Take this," Shisui said as he pressed a rolled parchment into Nathan's hand. "From now on, every secret of the Uchiha clan is yours to explore. The archives are open. Study them at your leisure." Nathan stared at the scroll in stunned silence. Joy flooded through him. This gift was more than he had dared to hope for. Until a moment ago, he'd been scheming how to break back into the clan's hidden vault and steal a glimpse of their most coveted techniques. But nothing excited him more than the legendary transfer seal. According to Uchiha lore, the transfer seal is a forbidden fuinjutsu that lets a Sharingan user imprint any jutsu into the recesses of their own eye, or even another person's. When prearranged conditions are met, the seal dissolves, and the stored technique bursts forth, striking the target without warning. In essence, it's like programming a ninjutsu to unleash itself the moment its trigger activates. With the right jutsu and cleverly defined conditions, its possibilities are endless. Nathan had assumed mastering this ocular art would demand years of arduous study and countless stealthy forays into the clan's vault. Now it lay within his grasp. Unlimited access, no more sneaking, no more risk. He couldn't help but break into a wide grin as he unfurled the scroll and began to read. Nathan couldn't refuse. In fact, a genuine warmth spread across his face as he looked at the great elder. He didn't care whether the elder was considered radical. If it served his interests, he would gladly throw in his lot with him. After all, Uchiha Fugaku had summoned Nathan here at midnight and delivered only polite pleasantries. No real help beyond that. Perhaps Fugaku believed that shielding him from the Hokage family's pressure was enough, but beside the elder's generosity, it felt paltry. With that in mind, Nathan bowed slightly and spoke earnestly. "Thank you, great elder." The elder waved him off. "Think nothing of it." He stifled a yawn and rubbed his eyes. "It's late. Go on down and get some rest. And don't forget your training." "Yes, elder," Nathan replied, nodding once more in respect before turning to leave. Creak, bang. The door swung shut behind him, and the great elder was left alone in the quiet study. Nathan lay on his back, his gaze fixed on the dimly lit ceiling beams. His eyes were empty, his spirit all but spent. In a barely audible whisper, he repeated the same name over and over. Mangekyo, Mangekyo. He had been Madara Uchiha's loyal retainer for generations, ever since the tumultuous Warring States era. Over centuries of conflict, he had witnessed firsthand the power and prestige that the Mangekyo Sharingan conferred upon its bearer. One awakened pair of Mangekyo eyes could tilt the balance of wars, settle feuds, and restore honor to the Uchiha name. And yet here he was, on the brink of despair. There would be no new Mangekyo today, not through Nathan's suffering, nor through any sacrifice he could make. Madara's legacy hung in the balance, and with it the fate of the entire clan. A hollow regret echoed in Nathan's chest. "What a pity," he murmured, the words fading into the stillness of the night. In that moment, Nathan understood that power alone could not heal every wound or resurrect every fallen dream. But still, he clung to hope, however faint, that the Uchiha's greatest boon might yet be awakened. Chapter 674, The Betrayal. Nathan stepped out of the Great Elder's courtyard into the cool evening air, only to find Uchiha Jiren waiting there. Nathan frowned in surprise. "You're still here?" Jiren looked up, his dark eyes shadowed with gratitude. "I'm waiting for you." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Waiting for me? You should be heading back." Jiren shook his head, his usual reserve giving way to earnestness. "No, I wanted to thank you." Nathan's confusion deepened. "Thank me? For what?" Taking a steadying breath, Jiren met Nathan's gaze. "For what you did to uncover the truth about my brother's death." Nathan felt a pang of recognition. "Your brother? You mean the one who awakened the dual Tomoe Sharingan so young?" Jiren nodded. "Yes, he was exceptionally gifted, but he died in the middle of a mission. Officially, he was killed by enemy Shinobi, an ambush caused by his recklessness. But I knew in my heart that wasn't right. My brother was always cautious." Nathan frowned at the memory. "You're the only one who ever spoke of him that way. Everyone else accepted the official report." "I could never accept it," Jiren said quietly. "So I conducted my own investigation in secret and discovered the truth. My brother wasn't felled by external foes at all, but by his own comrades. More precisely, an Anbu operative, a root agent." Nathan's heart tightened. The implication was staggering. A Uchiha slain not by their traditional enemies, but by their hidden protectors. "You found evidence of an internal ambush?" Jiren nodded. "Traces of chakra suppression seals on his body, inconsistencies in the mission log, everything pointed to Root. But I needed proof and support to expose the conspiracy. Your help made that possible." Nathan inhaled deeply, the weight of Jiren's words settling over him. "I'm glad I could help, but be careful. Going up against Root is dangerous." A determined light flickered in Jiren's eyes. "I know, but the village deserves the truth, and my brother deserves justice." Nathan placed a hand on Jiren's shoulder. "Then let's see this through together." As the two shinobi stood side by side under the dusk sky, the shadows of betrayal and secrets gathered around them, propelling them toward a reckoning that would shake the foundation of the Hidden Leaf village. Nathan suppressed a snort. "Thank you for killing Danzo and avenging my brother," Uchiha Jito had said with quiet intensity. Only now did Nathan understand the look of conflicted gratitude Jito had worn when he'd invited him to see the Great Elder. Jito had long harbored a desire to avenge his brother, but until now he had lacked the strength to act. Learning of Danzo's demise, he must have suspected Nathan's involvement, and felt gratitude, confusion, and sorrow all at once. Nathan shook his head, steeling himself. "You've got the wrong person," he said, keeping his tone light. "Danzo's death isn't because of me." For a long moment, Jito's dark eyes held his. Then, as if reaching a decision, he inclined his head. "Perhaps, but still, thank you." Without another word, Jito turned and strode away, vanishing down the path that led to the Uchiha clan's ancestral burial grounds. Nathan watched him go, exhaling slowly. He gave himself a mental shake, determined not to read too deeply into Jito's gratitude or his silent farewell. He hurried home on alert, half expecting someone else to emerge from the shadows. But the road remained empty, and Nathan arrived at his doorstep without further interruption. He barely paused to wash his face before rolling up his sleeves and resuming the demanding regimen of his reflection heart technique, focusing every ounce of will on the inward journey ahead. Nathan was training at Uchiha Fugaku's estate. By the time he finished his final set of the Palm Immortal technique, he'd actually exceeded his daily quota. Only the Mirror Heart technique remained, so he pressed on. An hour and a half slipped away in the blink of an eye before he finally completed his last repetition. With tonight's regimen at last hecked off, he allowed himself a long, satisfied exhale. Earlier, he'd sparred against 4 Root operatives from the Hongyu squad, siphoning off their chakra to refill his own reserves. Without that refill, he never would have had enough energy to finish the evening's drills. Yawning, Nathan surveyed his surroundings. A handful of Uchiha guards, deployed by the clan elders, stood watch around the estate gates. No one else lingered nearby. Feeling secure, he headed to wash up. Strictly speaking, these guards were there to protect him, but in reality, their presence was a message to the village. Don't even think about sneak attacks, abductions, or any underhanded schemes. If anyone still doubted his abilities, it wouldn't be long before they discovered just how formidable he'd become. Nathan didn't refuse the elder's request. In fact, it meant he'd get to sleep longer and rest more soundly. After washing up, he slipped back into his room and was asleep almost instantly. A soft snore was the only sound all night. At first light, Nathan got up, washed, and had a quick breakfast. He gathered his belongings and slipped out of the village, walking until he was sure no one was nearby. He was just about to unleash wind style, wind wings, and don the chakra feather clothes when he suddenly sensed another presence. Subtle, silent, unmistakable. Instantly alert, he scanned the trees. A faint crunch of undergrowth gave the intruder away. From behind a great oak stepped a tall figure with jet black hair, ghost-white skin, and slit golden eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. An icy chill radiated from the man. Orochimaru. He paused, regarding Nathan with the hungry air of a predator sizing up its prey. Nathan watched silently as Orochimaru glided forward, his pale skin almost luminescent under the moonlight. He licked his lips with a slow, deliberate gesture. "Nathan," he murmured, "your ability to remain motionless is remarkable, but when you do move, you're devastating. You even defeated Danzo." Nathan's face remained impassive. "Lord Orochimaru, you must be mistaken. I don't possess that kind of power. Danzo's end had nothing to do with me." Orochimaru offered a faint, knowing smile, entirely untroubled by the denial. His serpentine gaze traced Nathan's silhouette as though appraising the strength within. "Still," he said, voice tinged with envy, "what a young, vigorous body you have." Nathan shook his head, brushing aside the compliment. "You sent for me, Lord Orochimaru. What is it you require?" Orochimaru inclined his head once. "There is a matter I'd like to discuss." Then, in a single fluid motion, his legs dissolved into coiling serpent tails. Before Nathan could even register the shift, Orochimaru shot forward, a streak of motion so swift it blurred the air itself. Had this assault come from anyone else, escape would have been impossible. But Nathan was different, his senses sharpened, every nerve attuned to the slightest disturbance. As Orochimaru's shadow swept over him, Nathan's eyes narrowed, ready for what would come next. Nathan's physical and spiritual attributes were more than a match for any ordinary shinobi. Even without activating his Sharingan, his reflexes moved faster than the eye could follow. In the span of a heartbeat, he planted both feet on the ground and shot backward, then snapped open his Sharingan. Through the glowing red tomoe, Nathan saw Orochimaru's maw split wide, fangs bared as if he meant to clamp down on Nathan's neck. It wasn't a ritual to apply the curse seal. It was simply a lethal attack, the venom in those fangs enough to incapacitate or kill him in an instant. Matching Orochimaru's trajectory in midair, Nathan drew his long sword from its sheath at his side. He formed the hand seals and unleashed his signature ninjutsu, Thunder Release, Lightning Sword. A crackling bolt of electricity leapt along the blade, lighting up the clearing like daylight and forcing Orochimaru's eyes shut against the glare. At that moment, Nathan halted his retreat. With a sudden pivot, he surged forward, sword tip aimed straight for Orochimaru's exposed neck. Yet Orochimaru's danger sense proved sharper than Nathan had anticipated. Even with his vision blurred, Nathan spun his head aside and dodged the blow. In an instant, their figures blurred past one another. Chapter 675, A Brief Clash. The two fighters sprang apart, then pivoted and charged at each other in a single fluid motion. From Orochimaru's mouth shot the slender legendary Kusanagi blade, writhing like a serpent through the air. In the next instant, it met Nathan's long sword with a brilliant shower of sparks. Ding! Ding! Metal rang on metal in a rapid-fire barrage of strikes, more than a dozen blows exchanged in the blink of an eye. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he searched for an opening. When their blades crossed once more, he seized the moment. "Lightning Release, Lightning Sword," he intoned. A surge of crackling electricity erupted at his palm, racing down the length of his sword. The charged blade sent a mighty jolt through the point of contact, arcing into Orochimaru in a blinding flash. The shockwave rocked Orochimaru's body, and his movements stuttered, his grip faltering. Nathan's blade followed through in a single, decisive arc. With a sharp hiss of steel, it sliced across Orochimaru's neck. A sickening sound of flesh giving way echoed in the clearing, then silence. Nathan's blade flashed in a clean arc, and, impossibly, Orochimaru's head fell to the ground, rolling across the dirt. Nathan paused, brows lifting. There was no way the legendary Snake Master could be felled so easily. Sure enough, the severed head withered on the spot, and from the gaping stump of the neck, a new Orochimaru slithered out. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Orochi-style substitute technique, he muttered. He'd only ever seen it performed through the mouth. He'd never imagined it could erupt from the neck like this. Before Nathan could strike again, the reborn Orochimaru opened his fanged grin and vomited a cascade of brown, venomous snakes. They poured forward in a living wave, hissing and coiling, intent on drowning Nathan under their writhing mass. Nathan recognized the formation at once. The 10,000 Snakes technique, a high-level ninjutsu capable of summoning countless serpents to overwhelm an opponent in a single deadly tide. He leapt back, readying himself for the onslaught. Nathan's heart pounded as he faced that writhing mass of venomous snakes. Even as a skilled swordsman, he dared not charge in head first. Vaulting backward with a powerful spring from his legs, he cleared the tangle of serpents and landed 20 feet away. Above him, Orochimaru's pale face curled in a cold, amused smile. With a subtle motion of his fingers, the snakes recoiled and then lunged at Nathan again, fangs bared. There would be no break in this onslaught. Nathan sheathed his sword, dropped to one knee, and formed the swift hand seals of his ninjutsu. Fire style, great fireball technique. A surge of chakra exploded up his throat. A brilliant jet of flame erupted from his mouth, at first a mere spark in the air, then rapidly blossoming into a roaring orb of fire more than 3 meters across. Nathan hurled it forward with all his strength. Boom. The fireball slammed into the serpent horde, unleashing a deafening blast. Tongues of flame licked out in every direction, engulfing the snakes in an inferno that shrieked and hissed. Within seconds, the writhing mass was silenced, reduced to blackened ash and smoldering bones. The acrid stench of charred scales and singed earth burned Nathan's nostrils, but he remained unmoving, eyes fixed on the clearing's ruin. Orochimaru's smile deepened as he watched the smoke curl into the sky. In that silent moment, Nathan knew that this victory, swift and fiery, was only the beginning of the trials to come. When the last flicker of flame died away, the field lay eerily still. No snakes writhed in the soil, and neither Nathan nor Orochimaru made a move. For a few heartbeat-long moments, they simply regarded one another. Then Nathan broke the silence. "Lord Orochimaru," he said, voice steady, "why did you attack me?" Orochimaru's pale lips curved into a curious smile. He gave a low, amused chuckle before replying. "Why did I attack you?" he echoed. "Boy, have you forgotten what you did? Slaying Danzo cost me more than you realize." Nathan's chest tightened. He couldn't deny it. Danzo had been indispensable to Orochimaru, not only for his under-the-table experiments, but also in the heated race for Hokage. Without Danzo's political clout and network of hidden allies, Orochimaru's bid for the title would have stood little chance. By killing Danzo, Nathan had severed Orochimaru's strongest support, and with it, any real shot at leadership. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words dried up. Orochimaru's lips curved into a thin, satisfied grin. "So now," Orochimaru murmured, "you've crippled my ambitions, and for that, you'll pay." What Nathan didn't know was that just that morning, the fourth Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, had paid Orochimaru a visit. In his possession lay irrefutable proof of Orochimaru's collusion with Danzo in those abhorrent human experiments. Faced with Hiruzen's evidence, Orochimaru had no choice but to withdraw from the Hokage election. His chances didn't merely diminish, they were erased entirely. Naturally, Orochimaru was furious. He came for Nathan, at least in part to vent his anger. But a deeper reason drove him. Nathan's recent actions had caught his attention. Orochimaru knew better than anyone the caliber of Danzo and his root operatives, and he understood exactly how ruthless Danzo could be. If Danzo had truly decided to make a move, he would have prepared every detail with lethal precision. And yet, Danzo had fallen to Nathan. None of Danzo's men had returned from that mission, and Danzo himself had been ensnared. Even more astonishing, Nathan had emerged unscathed, without so much as a scratch. That alone was enough to spark Orochimaru's curiosity. With every step he took, he wondered, who was this boy who could outwit Root's finest and walk away unhurt? Driven by that question, he followed the trail until it led straight to Nathan. Nathan watched Orochimaru's retreating silhouette and couldn't help but smile inwardly. Of all the shinobi he'd faced, few carried themselves with such unshakable calm, especially not ordinary jonin. That level of poise spoke volumes, absolute confidence in one's own strength. Their brief skirmish had confirmed it. Nathan's techniques held up, but Orochimaru had tested him just enough to be certain. Too bad the edge of the forest lay so close to the village. It wasn't a place for a prolonged battle, and clearly Orochimaru hadn't come seeking a real fight, only a measure of Nathan's ability. No wonder he bowed out so quickly. "I hope we can cooperate again," Orochimaru called over his shoulder before melting into the trees. "Cooperate?" Nathan muttered. "He means I'm a lab rat." He watched the tall figure disappear among the ancient trunks. It wasn't hard to read Orochimaru's intentions. Choosing this spot near the village limits, offering a mere greeting spar, it all fit. There'd been no real test, just a prelude. Now that he'd seen what he needed to see, Orochimaru would vanish until the next time he needed answers. And Nathan would be ready. Nathan paused, questioning why he hadn't tried to stop his opponent from leaving. He held no deep grudge against them. There was nothing to gain by prolonging the fight. This wasn't some video game where slaying foes minted experience points. He'd learned what he could here. His real priority was sharpening his own skills, not chasing empty victories. Besides, even if he challenged them again, he couldn't guarantee a quick finish, and they were dangerously close to Konoha. Any uproar would draw the village's attention, and he had no wish to explain himself to the guards. There was simply no point in risking exposure for no reward. Resolving to make better use of his time, Nathan formed the wind-sealing hand sign and channeled chakra into wind style, wind wings. Almost instantly, translucent wings of swirling air sprouted from his back, enveloping him in the feathery aura of his chakra feather garb. With a powerful lift, he soared into the sky and set off toward the island in the distance. Chapter 676, Transformation. Over the next 3 days, Nathan fell into a strict, almost ritualistic routine. At dawn each morning, he slipped out of the village and crossed to the deserted island offshore. There he split off dozens of shadow clones, assigning each group one of 8 advanced techniques to master. 1. Wind Style, Rasen Shuriken. 2. Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. 3. Lightning Style, Thunder Sword. 4. Shadow Sword Technique. 5. Illusion, Darkness Walking Technique. 6. Nirvana Jingsha Technique. 7. Earth Style, Earth Flowing River. 8. Earth Style, Heart Beheading Technique. Depending on how much chakra he poured in and the inherent complexity of each style, a full training cycle could last anywhere from half a day to a full day. Every 60 minutes, Nathan recalled his clones back into his own body, absorbing their newly honed experiences and converting that data into genuine skill proficiency. Meanwhile, Nathan's original body was far from idle. He continuously ran the heart reflection technique to accelerate his Sharingan's evolution and diligently practiced the palm immortal technique to strengthen his physical frame. The heart reflection sessions progressed steadily as before, but each time he returned to the palm immortal form, he pushed himself a little further, refining its structure and power. By the end of the 3rd day, Nathan felt the first tangible shifts within him. His Sharingan's tomoe glowed sharper, his muscles felt denser, and the edges of those 8 techniques had already begun to gleam with new precision. This disciplined cycle of clone training and solitary cultivation was only the beginning. He could already sense the next stage of his transformation drawing near. After 3 days of training, Nathan had boosted his body-strengthening efficiency from 10% to 20%. He knew that each new percentage point would be harder to win. Increasing by another 10% might take 10 days or even 2 weeks. But he wasn't in any hurry. His immediate goal was to push that figure up to around 50% in the next development phase, cutting the usual time investment by a third. Each day followed the same rigorous routine. Before dusk, he devoted himself to mastering the multiple shadow clone technique. Then, once he returned to the village, he spent another 1 to 2 hours polishing the finer points, adjusting his stance, refining his focus, and strengthening the control that would sustain multiple clones simultaneously. His days were packed and deeply satisfying. Yet not everyone was pleased by his progress. A handful of villagers who still suspected him of murdering the elder watched Nathan with thinly veiled resentment. They argued that he had yet to clear his name, and how dare he stroll in and out as if nothing had happened. Their whispers and cold glares, however, had no effect on him. Nathan was so absorbed in his training that he hardly noticed their hostility, nor did he care. His only concern was pushing beyond his current limits and proving his strength to himself, once and for all. Nathan lay in bed, every ounce of his focus on the transformation that was about to overtake him. After 3 days of relentless training, his body teetered on the brink of a breakthrough. He estimated that in another half day at most, he'd reach the critical point, and then, with his human control ability, he could shatter those invisible shackles and evolve once more. A quiet thrill ran through him. Soon, he felt the slightest strange swelling beneath his skin, murmured to himself, and slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, Nathan ate a quick breakfast and slipped out of the village. Activating wind style, wind wings, he unfurled a pair of translucent, razor-thin wings of air and accelerated to nearly 300 meters per second. In under an hour, he shot south from Konoha's heartland across the land of fire and arrived above the small island in the southern sea. He circled high above the shore several times, then reached up to his brow, dispelling the guardian seal carved between his eyebrows. His white eyes snapped open, scanning every inch of land and sky until he was certain he was utterly alone. Satisfied, he descended, touched down silently on the sandy ground, and without hesitation formed 8 perfect shadow clones. Together they launched into today's rigorous training regimen. After round of grueling practice, Nathan felt his body edging ever closer to its absolute limit. By midday, he slammed into an invisible barrier that sapped any further gains. No matter how many times he unleashed the palm fairy technique, his strength refused to budge. When his physical fitness score was below 20 points, he could still grind through bottlenecks in silence, but now it was futile. If you can't break through, you can only stay where you are. Thankfully, he still had his magical skill, human control, to lean on, but there was no need to rush headlong into it. First, Nathan recalled all his shadow clones, absorbing and distilling their memories and training experiences into tangible boosts in his own skill proficiency. Then he rummaged through his ninja tool bag, withdrew several soldiers' ration pills, popped them into his mouth, chewed quickly, and swallowed. As the pills' restorative effects began to flow through him, he closed his eyes and methodically adjusted his breathing, aligning his body and mind for the breakthrough to come. Before attempting a breakthrough, Nathan knew he had to hone himself to absolute peak condition. It wasn't enough to simply plunge ahead. He needed every fiber of his body and mind razor sharp. As the old saying goes, sharpening the blade doesn't delay the cutting of wood. It makes the job both smoother and faster. Half an hour later, the sun stood high overhead. Seated in full lotus, Nathan gently opened his eyes. He ran through his self-checks. Chakra flow steady, energy reserves at maximum, mental clarity unshakable, every indicator read perfectly. With quiet resolve, he activated his Manjikyo Sharingan and unleashed its signature pupil technique, human control. In an instant, an imperceptible force rippled through him, heightening his self-awareness beyond normal limits. For a fleeting moment, he even felt as if he'd developed an inner vision, able to peer into hidden layers of flesh and bone. Of course, that was only an illusion. His actual perception hadn't reached such a pinnacle yet. Still, Nathan recognized that this glimpse pointed the way forward. After all, even the fabled Byakugan can only see through barriers. It cannot truly fathom every secret of the human body. This, he decided, would be the direction of his next great evolution. Nathan closed his eyes and banished the daydreams of inner vision, the sort of all-seeing insight immortal cultivation novels always spoke of. If he could master such a talent, refining his palm immortal technique or even unlocking new powers would be infinitely easier. He shook his head to clear his mind, formed the requisite hand seals, and activated the palm immortal technique. Immediately, a dense stream of yang-charged chakra condensed at his fingertips and shot into his body, saturating every cell and organ with revitalizing energy. Guided by his human control ability, the infusion took hold more effectively than before. Though he still hadn't shattered his current bottleneck, Nathan could feel his physical strength rising steadily. At the same time, his Sharingan's progress clocked in at 40,000 out of 50,000, a milestone that had lengthened the window of a single human control activation to nearly 50 seconds. Long enough, he realized, to sustain an uninterrupted enhancement cycle for his palm immortal technique. Before he knew it, the first session had run its course, and Nathan felt more confident than ever that real breakthroughs lay just ahead. Nathan took a brief pause, letting his vision clear. As soon as his senses reset, he shaped his fingers into a seal and unleashed the palm immortal technique, simultaneously channeling the power of human control. Again and again, he cycled D through the motion, seal, release, control, until 10 minutes had slipped by unnoticed. On the sixth activation of the palm immortal technique, the invisible fetters that had been capping his potential suddenly dissolved. A rush of exhilaration coursed through Nathan's veins as he recognized the barrier's collapse. He felt energy pouring into him, his body growing stronger, his spirit soaring. The impulse to shout his triumph welled up within him, but he held his breath instead, savoring each heartbeat and the profound joy of transformation unfolding from within. Chapter 677, Promotion. Nathan sat cross-legged atop a massive boulder at the heart of the island, eyes gently closed as he tuned into the subtle currents stirring within his body. With a final mental surge, the last of the invisible restraints shattered. Instantly, he could feel the space around his future self expand. No longer confined, his entire being relaxed and opened. Tiny sparks of scorching energy ignited in each cell, coalescing into slender streams that pulsed along the chakra meridians. Every point they touched was reinforced, the flesh and blood growing stronger with each passing second. Through this relentless cycle of flow and fortification, Nathan's physique attributes surged upward, heaving past the blackjack tier and edging ever closer to the next level. Time slipped by in silence, broken only by the soft whisper of sea breeze against stone. Then, at a single decisive moment, Nathan's eyes flew open. A broad grin crossed his face. "It's done," he whispered, excitement dancing in his voice. Without hesitation, he summoned his status panel. The metrics glowed before him, confirming what his body already knew. He had achieved a breakthrough. A new power rung in his bones, heralding fresh challenges and greater strength yet to come. A pale blue curtain of light shimmered into being before Nathan's eyes, unfolding like a living scroll. In its translucent glow, his recent gains were recorded for all to see. Name, Uchiha. Nathan, age 13, physique, 21, 22, spirit, 22. Chakra, 279,348. Bloodline abilities, Sharingan, Kaleidoscope, 30,000, 50,000, 35,568, 50,000. Byakugan, Unawakened, 90,100. Byakugan Awakened, 1,000. Techniques and skill levels. Chakra Refining Technique, Level 6, 948, 10,000, 1,528, 10,000. Wind Release, Spiral Shuriken, Level 9, 31,000, 321,000, 77,000, and 3,100. Water Escape, Great Explosive Water Rush, Level 7, 20,000. Thunder Escape, Lightning Body, Level 1, 6,200. Thunder Release, Lightning Sword, Level 1, 100, 200, 9,200 or 10,000. Earth Escape, Earthflow Stream, Level 3, 800, 1,000. Earth Escape, Heart Beheading Technique, Level 4, 200, 2,000. Multi-Shadow Clone Technique, Level 8, 14,000, 50,000, 32,270. Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique, Level 8, 7,330, 50,000, 27,000, 650,000. Genjutsu, Darkness, Level 3, 741,000. Nirvana Abode Art, Level 3, 740, 10,000. Chakra Scalpel, Level 7, 14 and 520,000. Shadow Swordsmanship, Level 6, 610,000, 4,110. Chakra Control, Level 6, 5,007 and 10,000, 6,300, 10,000. Perfected techniques, no further progress bars required. Water release, shark bullet technique. Level 9, chakra feathered thunder prison. Level 7. Nathan blinked once, taking in the readout. His physique had edged up by a single point, finally restoring balance between body and spirit. He closed his eyes, feeling the steady pulse of chakra coursing through him, surer now of his strength and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Nathan felt the shift deep within himself, an awakening of power long dormant. He knew, without a doubt, that if he tapped into his full potential now, his chakra capacity would climb to an astonishing 150,000 points. That's a remarkable 250,000-point leap from his previous limit of 900,000. By comparison, the last time his mental attribute broke past level 22, he gained only 150,000 extra chakra. This time, he'd added another 100,000 on top of that. Such a dramatic increase wasn't just the result of restoring balance between his physique and spirit and unlocking hidden reserves. The real breakthrough lay in the complete awakening of his Byakugan. As his body underwent its transformation, the final barrier to his white eye shattered. Now fully realized, the Byakugan fused seamlessly with him, integrating into his very being and forever changing the limits of his power. Nathan felt a surge of power ripple through his body as his physical potential soared, pushing the theoretical ceiling of his chakra pool to an astonishing 250,000. Even more significant than this boost in maximum capacity was the dramatic improvement in chakra recovery. Where the spiritual attribute had only sharpened his mental resilience, the physical attribute now fortified his overall endurance, allowing him to withstand the rigorous demands of the chakra refining technique far longer than before. To put this newfound stamina to the test, Nathan wasted no time and dove back into the chakra refining session. Time seemed to warp as minutes slipped by, and at last, 30 minutes later, he opened his eyes. Every meter, gauge, and indicator on his chakra monitors confirmed it. His body could now sustain 22 hours of refining per day, an increase from the 20-hour limit he had reached before. Grinning with satisfaction, Nathan prepared to press even further, eager to explore the full extent of his enhanced capabilities. Nathan sat back and cut off his chakra refining technique. He just extended the level 6 refinement by 2 hours, an extra 6,000 chakra points every day, and now he needed to check how much his body could regenerate naturally. He fixed his gaze on the chakra bar in his status panel and timed the recovery. 15 minutes later, the bar had climbed by 8,333 points. Nathan did the quick math. That rate translated to 33,332 points per hour, or 800,000 points over a full day. Up until now, his natural daily recovery had been 640,000, so this upgrade added a whopping 160,000 points to his baseline. Then there was the refining itself. Level 6 yielded 3,000 points per hour. Running it 22 hours a day meant an extra 66,000 points through deliberate refinement, compared with the old maximum of 20 hours, 60,000 points. In total, Nathan could now restore 866,000 chakra points every 24 hours, up from 700,000 before. That was a free boost of 166,000 points each day. He couldn't afford to squander such an advantage. With renewed focus, Nathan swept through the list of skills on his panel, already planning how best to push his newfound reserves to their limits. Nathan pauses to assess his progress. Wind style, Rasen Shuriken, is already flirting with level 10. It'll rank up within the next 2 weeks at most, so there's no point in pumping more chakra into it now. Lightning style, Lightning Sword will reach perfection by tomorrow morning, so it, too, can stand on its own without further investment. As for Shuriken Shadow Clone technique, current rates indicate it will cap out at level 9 within just over a month, leaving no urgency to devote extra energy. That leaves only multiple Shadow Clone technique. But as Nathan's chakra reserves and recovery have grown, it's become increasingly difficult to dip his energy levels low enough for extended practice sessions. Pouring more chakra into it now would waste far too much energy for too little return. In short, he sees no advantage in further investment. Scanning his skill list one more time, Nathan concludes that all available chakra should be funneled into the 4 newest techniques he's just unlocked. Each one has barely seen any attention so far, and now is the time to change that. Nathan's only near-mastered skill was the Earth Escape Heart Decapitation technique. He'd pushed it to level 5 and expected perfection soon. His other 3 abilities, however, still had a long way to go. Nathan simply didn't want to pour any more chakra into them. A few days later, the unrest in the village over Danzo's death finally died down. Everything was proceeding according to plan, and now it was time to prepare for capturing the tailed beasts. Nathan intended to devote his chakra reserves entirely to learning new sealing techniques, and he already knew exactly which ones he would tackle first. Chapter 678, Mastering the Seals. Nathan knelt on the training grounds and unzipped his ninja tool bag. He retrieved a single sealing scroll, carefully spread it before him, and formed the required hand seals. With a sharp cry, "Release!" he thrust his palm forward. A thunderous crack echoed as a swirl of chakra-infused smoke erupted around the scroll. When the haze cleared, the bold character "Seal" had vanished. In its place lay 2 smaller scrolls and a bound manuscript, relics from Danzo's personal collection. Nathan's pulse quickened as he recognized their contents. The first scroll detailed the 4 symbols seal, the very technique he'd once used to subdue tailed beasts. The second contained the self-karma curse seal. Neither came as a surprise. Danzo was known to possess advanced sealing arts, and the inner 4 symbols seal he developed was simply a variant layered atop the original 4 symbols method. Flipping through the little book, Nathan found a revelation. By superimposing 2 4 symbols seals, one could forge the legendary 8 trigram seal. This was the same formidable jutsu Minato Namikaze had employed to bind the 9 tails within Naruto. In the entire Shinobi world, few sealing techniques matched its power. It could establish impenetrable barriers at will and lock them with absolute safety. Nathan leaned back on his heels, scanning the ancient ink. Learning this art could reshape the battlefield, if he could master it. With the seals laid before him, the path to a new level of power opened at last. Nathan had planned to study a sealing technique by analogy, but when he opened the book, he discovered there wasn't a single sealing method recorded. Instead, the volume detailed an S-rank forbidden jutsu, the Flying Thunder God technique. True, he already possessed wind style, wind wings, which let him traverse vast distances at great speed, but flight is still bound by time. The Flying Thunder God technique, however, is a space transfer ninjutsu. As long as you lock onto a set of coordinates and muster enough chakra, the teleportation is instantaneous. That kind of instantaneous travel would be invaluable in his quest to capture the tailed beast. It would eliminate travel time and enhance secrecy. On the training ground before him lay 2 scrolls and that single forbidden book. His next steps were clear. Without hesitation, Nathan formed his hand seals and unleashed the multiple shadow clone technique. With a thunderous crack, a plume of chakra smoke exploded outward. When it cleared, 11 identical Nathans stood arrayed across the field, each ready to master the Flying Thunder God technique. Nathan surveyed his 11 shadow clones, then detailed the assignments with calm precision. 8 of them he directed to continue drilling the core 8 arts as usual. To the remaining 3, he handed 2 scrolls and a leather-bound manual, ordering each to master its contents at their own pace. He intended to learn these new techniques himself, but there was no need to waste his own time on the first stages. His clones could handle that. Nathan's true priority lay elsewhere. He had just completed this phase of his body's enhancement and was poised to enter the next. Before proceeding, however, he needed to test the effects of the twice-refined Palm Immortal technique on his current form. By doing so, he could more accurately predict when his next transformation would occur, and plan his training accordingly. With his decision made, Nathan dismissed all 11 clones and took a deep breath. He settled into his stance and began the Palm Immortal technique, focusing every ounce of his will on channeling its power through his limbs and core. Time slipped by unnoticed. When he finally paused an hour later, Nathan opened his eyes and stood perfectly still, concentrating inward. He traced the flow of energy through his body, measuring the subtle changes wrought by his practice. Satisfied, he prepared to plot the course for the next stage of his journey. Nathan finally worked it out. At his current cultivation speed, it would take at least 4 months before his body approached the next transformation threshold. That accelerated pace was thanks to the second, improved version of his Palm Immortal technique. Without it, the interval would stretch past 5 months. Of course, if his next upgrades go according to plan, he might cut that down again, to 3 months, as he did before. With his goal firmly in mind, Nathan banished the thought and activated his multiple shadow clone technique. In an instant, every clone training across the forests and coastlines around him dissolved into glowing chakras. Each fragment carried back an hour's worth of practice and insight, swirling toward Nathan's core. A moment later, he frowned as the torrent of memories and experiences crashed into his senses. Steeling himself, he centered his mind and began methodically absorbing the influx, just digesting every lesson his clones had learned. Nathan had already committed the first 8 shadow clone techniques to memory, so reviewing them took almost no effort. He dove straight into the next 3. Over the past hour, he'd been drilling these new skills, though with decidedly mixed results. The 2 sealing techniques advanced at lightning speed. Nathan's previous work on sealing arrays and guarding seals gave him a solid foundation, and in just 60 minutes the progress bars for both had climbed by nearly 1/3. If he kept practicing flawlessly, no misdrawn symbols, no skipped steps, he stood a good chance of imprinting them to his skill panel and unlocking level 1 in another 2 hours. By contrast, the Flying Thunder God technique, a notoriously demanding space-time ninjutsu, crawled along. In that same hour, he'd only succeeded in internalizing the book's step-by-step instructions. Trial practice was still ahead of him, and when, or if, he could imprint this technique onto his panel remained anyone's guess. Nathan wasn't worried about failing to enter the dimension anymore. His spatial perception had sharpened dramatically once the sealing array was perfected. As long as he could step inside, reaching a flawless state was only a matter of time. He remained calm. For the next 15 minutes, Nathan focused on digesting the memories and training data his shadow clones had accumulated over the past hour. He funneled every lesson into his own muscle memory, boosting his skill proficiencies. Then, with a steady breath, he opened his eyes, formed a swift hand seal, and unleashed the multi-shadow clone technique. 11 identical Nathans burst into existence. He quickly assigned each clone its practice routine, some drilling the Palm Immortal technique, others refining the Reflection Heart technique, and sent them off. Nathan himself settled into a training stance. This time, having passed the recent trial, he no longer needed to practice the Palm Immortal technique in isolation. He could alternate seamlessly between it and the Reflection Heart technique. At the rate he was progressing, his Sharingan's evolution would shatter the 40,000, 50,000 mark within 3 weeks. By advancing now, Nathan won't just see his chakra reserves swell. Every power granted by the Mangekyo Sharingan will grow stronger as well. He'll move one step closer to the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and finally free himself from the ever-looming threat of blindness. Since first unlocking the Mangekyo, Nathan has used its techniques sparingly. His unique constitution once protected him from strain, but that protection won't last forever. A man without a plan for tomorrow is chained to today's fears, and Nathan refuses to live in constant anxiety over his sight. He must hasten his progress and secure the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan as soon as possible. That single goal even eclipsed his curiosity about the Byakugan newly fused into his body. There's no doubt the Byakugan can evolve too, perhaps all the way to the mythic Samsara Eye. At that level, its power rivals the Sharingan's highest form. The only problem is that the Byakugan's evolutionary path is vast and unfocused. Few could hope to soar, complete it. For Nathan, however, every step toward greater power is a step toward freedom, and he will not rest until he achieves it. Nathan sensed that something was different this time. The progress bar on the panel read 1/1000, which meant the process could be split into multiple stages, each stage subtly lowering the overall difficulty. If he discovered the right method, failure would no longer be a concern. A whirlwind of thoughts threatened to distract him, but Nathan pushed them aside and shifted his focus to his training. He alternated between the palm immortal technique and the heart reflection technique, each cycle forging his body into greater resilience and propelling his Sharingan's evolution forward. Chapter 679, Entry and Distribution. 2 hours later, in the mid-afternoon light, Nathan recalled his shadow clones for the third time. He pored over their battle experiences and the memories they'd gathered, then finally paused his practice to rest. Opening his eyes, he brought up his proficiency panel. After 3 hours of continuous training, both the 4-symbol seal and the self-inflicted curse seal were fully imprinted, and already at proficiency level 1. To his surprise, the legendary S-rank forbidden technique, the Flying Thunder God technique, had also been successfully recorded on his panel after numerous attempts. Curious about the chakra cost, Nathan ran the numbers. The self-inflicted curse seal proved the most efficient, requiring just 100 chakra points on average to raise proficiency by 1 point. The 4-symbol seal consumed a bit more, about 120 points per proficiency increase. As for the Flying Thunder God technique, even at its bare minimum, each proficiency point demanded a hefty 150 chakra points. Satisfied with his progress and well aware of the costs involved, Nathan leaned back, ready to plan his next move. The door to greater power had swung wide open, but it would come at a steep price. Nathan's problem wasn't just that he hadn't fully unlocked the gate, his overall proficiency was still too low. As a result, practicing this space-time ninjutsu ate up an absurd amount of time, limiting him to only a few attempts per day. And it wasn't because he lingered over the details. Even inscribing the chakra seal, let alone sensing precise spatial coordinates, drained him. Techniques that Minato Namikaze and Tobirama Senju performed on instinct demanded painstaking care from Nathan. One slip, and the jutsu simply fizzled. In its current state, he couldn't hope to deploy it in the heat of battle. By his estimates, he'd need to raise his proficiency to at least level 7 before he could reliably open the portal, still too slow for combat. To match Minato or Tobirama's effortless speed and flexibility, he'd have to hit level 8 or 9, essentially near mastery. That goal felt light years away, and he couldn't afford to dwell on it, unless he found a way to dramatically accelerate his progress. Only by capturing a tailed beast quickly could he compress years of training into weeks, perhaps even days. That was his only shot at closing the gap. Despite ranking the tailed beast high on his agenda, Nathan knew that seizing the village's nuclear weapon, even from a small settlement, wouldn't be easy. He shook his head, set that plan aside for the moment, and turned his thoughts to how best to allocate the extra chakra granted by his recent boost to the physique attribute. His eyes swept over his 3 skills. Without question, the 4-symbol seal, renowned for its miraculous effect on tailed beasts, deserved top priority. Nathan decided to pour half of his newly acquired chakra, 80,000 points, into it. With that investment, his daily proficiency gain would jump to 660 points, meaning he could reach level 7 in roughly a month, and at that rank, regardless of whether it hit its absolute ceiling, the seal would be fully operational. He then split the remaining chakra between his other 2 abilities. 36,000 points went into sharpening the self-injury curse seal, and the final 50,000 points bolstered his mastery of the Flying Thunder God technique. Nathan calculated that his seal of the self-injury curse binding would earn 360 proficiency points each day, while his Flying Thunder God technique would gain 330 points. At that rate, in 30 days, both would surpass level 6. They might still be limited at that stage, but they'd be reliable in an emergency. Why wait a month? Because Nathan's plan to capture the tailed beast was set in exactly 30 days. By then, his Sharingan would break through the 40,000, 50,000 evolution threshold and unlock the 4th stage, Susanoo. In its 4th form, Susanoo sprouts a lower body and swells to immense size, enough to face a tailed beast head-on. That final enhancement would be the Yi stone of his operation. Of course, he intended to keep his true strength hidden until the moment came, but he preferred to be fully prepared. He also needed that time to complete his reconnaissance on the 7 tails. With everything decided, Nathan raised his hand and activated the multiple shadow clone technique once more, this time producing an extra clone beyond his usual number, ready to carry out his plan. Nathan surveyed the 12 shadow clones lined up before him. With a few swift gestures, he assigned training regimens to 11 of them and dismissed them on their separate tasks. Only one clone remained. "Your job is the investigation," he said. He'd just thought of it, and poof, created a fresh shadow clone devoted solely to surveillance. As for himself, Nathan had neither the time nor the desire to snoop around. His training schedule was relentless, and the risk of being spotted was far too great. On the surface, the village's recent turmoil seemed to have died down, but he knew better. Every time he slipped in or out, someone was watching. Every social media post, every comment thread, every upvote and downvote, somebody was monitoring him, dissatisfied with his unchecked freedom. He couldn't be sure whether they'd gotten onto the island yet. All he knew was that he wouldn't take the chance of exposing himself. Without solid evidence, they had no leverage against him. So, he'd let his clone do the digging and keep himself safely beyond their reach. Nathan firmly decided he wouldn't investigate the matter in person, no matter the risk. Even if it was just a shadow clone, he wanted to keep any involvement strictly low profile. "Understood," the clone said crisply, bowing once before weaving its fingers in the familiar hand seals. With a rush of chakra, it invoked wind style, wind wings, its form draped in the shimmering aura of chakra feather clothes. Within moments, the clone lifted into the sky and disappeared over the horizon. Nathan watched its silhouette vanish, shook his head, then exhaled and closed his eyes. He settled back into his meditative posture, drawing chakra inward to continue his cultivation. Time slipped by, and before he knew it, night had fallen. Nathan finished the final iteration of the multiple shadow clone technique and dispelled the gathered copies. He stood and scanned the darkened horizon. There was still no sign of the reconnaissance clone, and not even a single report. He could only assume it was safe for now. After all, a shadow clone transmits its memories only if it dies. Beyond that, he had no information. But Nathan wasn't worried. Rushing such an investigation was pointless. Patience, he reminded himself, was key. Satisfied with that thought, he turned away and walked back to his training area, his mind already returning to the discipline of chakra control. After packing up his belongings, Nathan formed the necessary hand seals and unleashed wind style, wind wings, immediately following it with chakra feather cloak. He shot into the sky and headed back toward Konoha village. More than half an hour later, he touched down in the bustling settlement, unfazed by the curious eyes that trailed him wherever he went. He saw no point in glaring back or putting on airs. He had more important things to do. Swerving onto the village's busiest street, he slipped into the first restaurant he found, grabbed a quick meal, then made his way home. Once inside, Nathan resumed his training, methodically working through the day's exercises until every last detail was complete. Finally, he allowed himself to rest, conserving his strength for tomorrow's practice. It was a simple, even monotonous life, but to Nathan, it was perfectly fulfilling. Chapter 680, Promotion and Voting. Meanwhile, in Koharu Utane's private quarters, a figure slipped in and bowed low before her. "My lady," he whispered, voice tense. "I've returned." Koharu lifted her head, the lids of her eyes drooping halfway. "Report," she ordered softly. "The subject remains unchanged," the man replied. "Every day he's either training or on his way to train. Nothing else, no signs of unusual activity." Koharu's expression darkened. In recent days, orders from the Hokage's office had compelled her to postpone any direct action against Nathan, the young prodigy they all watched so closely. But that did not mean she had abandoned her suspicions. Far more impetuous than advisors like Midamon-an or Sarutobi Hiruzen, she chafed at the delays. Even the Uchiha clan's solemn vow to protect Nathan at all costs couldn't dampen her resolve. Still, Nathan's vigilance had proved impenetrable. No slip, no misstep, nothing for her agents to exploit. The frustration gnawed at her, but village protocol forbade rash maneuvers. For now, she would have to wait and watch, though only until the slightest advantage presented itself. Koharu Utatane sat motionless behind her desk, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the room. Outside, her subordinate had just handed in a fresh report on the Uchiha clan's movements, and found nothing. Koharu's fingers tightened around the scroll. At a moment like this, any rash decision could play right into their hands. She quelled the anger rising in her chest and gave her order in a calm, even tone. "Keep them under surveillance. Don't let your guard down for a second." The man bowed crisply. "Yes, Shisho," he replied, then slipped out on silent feet. Once the door shut, Koharu closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh. Memories of past failures, and the heavy cost of each, drifted through her mind. "Not now," she whispered, as if expecting an answer. The next afternoon, on the same windswept island, Nathan stood alone in the training clearing. He took a slow breath, then wove the seals for the multi-shadow clone technique. 11 identical figures burst into existence around him, each ready to fight. For hours, Nathan sparred against his clones, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion. Each clash teaching him something new about form, timing, and the raw power of nature's energy. At last, sweat pouring down his face, he formed his final seal. In a rush of chakra, all 11 clones collapsed into him, their collective experiences dissolving into his own chakra network. A brilliant surge of electricity crackled over his skin as he absorbed the last echoes of their combat data. When the flash faded, Nathan stood still for a long moment, letting the breakthrough settle. He drew his long sword from its sheath. The blade rang sharply in the quiet grove, a promise of power yet to be unleashed. Closing his eyes, Nathan centered himself, calling upon the primal force of lightning. Blue-white arcs danced along the length of his sword. Then, with a single fluid swing, he unleashed his perfected technique, Thunder Release, Lightning Sword. The air split as a luminous arc, over 10 meters long, streaked outward, shredding the wooden training pillars in its path. Splinters flew, and the ground smoked where the lightning had struck. Nathan opened his eyes, chest heaving, a triumphant smile lighting his features. He had done it. He had truly mastered the lightning sword. Now, whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the power he'd earned. Nathan stood amid the flickering sword lights as thunder rumbled through the sky. With a single, precise slash, he sent a thread of lightning arcing from his blade to a distant tree, scorching its bark until it smoldered. He followed up with another swift stroke, and a crackling lightning blade shot out to split a massive boulder in two. Since reaching perfect state, level 7, Nathan had unlocked the Thunder Release, Lightning Sword, allowing him to strike from afar. Each of those electric blades carried force equivalent to a Nandard's C-rank ninjutsu, enough to shatter bones or sever tendons if they found an enemy's vital point. Paired with his mastery of one-handed seals and seal-free techniques, his melee prowess had grown remarkably. After a few more test swings of the lightning sword, Nathan sheathed his katana and tapped open his proficiency panel. As the display flickered to life, he studied his updated stats, already plotting his next move. Now that Nathan had perfected his lightning sword, he needed to reassign the chakra he'd invested, a whopping 87,000 points. That's more than enough to accelerate any skill's growth. He scanned the list of recently learned jutsu, confirmed their progress was on schedule, and decided, just as he'd planned, to pour every last point into water style, Great Explosive Water Rush Wave. This technique is an advanced form of his earlier water style, Explosive Water Rush Wave, and it starts at proficiency level 7, meaning it takes far less time to master. From his previous tests, Nathan knew that each proficiency level required roughly 120 chakra points. With 87,000 points at his disposal, he could gain about 725 levels of proficiency. At that rate, he'd have the jutsu perfected at A rank, level 900, in just 3 months. Maybe 3 months wouldn't be enough to prepare for his next move. Still, even if his water domain only reached level 8, it would give him a decisive terrain advantage against the tailed beasts. He might never have to use it, but prudence demanded that he be ready. With everything in place, Nathan closed the display panel. Reports logged, seals confirmed, preparations complete. He then performed the multiple shadow clone technique, splitting himself into 11 perfect duplicates, each poised to repeat the new sequence of movements he'd just mastered. Day after day, Nathan and his clones trained in relentless synchrony. All the while, the streets of Konoha grew more animated, the villagers eagerly discussing the upcoming Hokage election and the fresh future they hoped their new leader would bring. At last, 10 days of waiting passed, and election morning arrived. Rather than journeying to his usual training island, Nathan remained within the village walls, quietly staking out a spot in the gathering crowd. In truth, the real outcome had already been decided. Behind closed doors, the factions had divided their interests, and the result was all but guaranteed. But today, the people of Konoha would witness the formal beginning of their next chapter. The senior shinobi elders filed forward one by one to cast their votes, more a formality than anything else. The process moved swiftly, and before long it was Nathan's turn. He stepped into the specially prepared voting chamber, composed as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Pausing at the threshold, he offered a respectful nod to 3rd Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi and the other elders seated on the dais. Then he approached the single, transparent ballot box set at the center of the room. Although only one box stood before them, 2 names were printed on the ballot: Namikaze Minato and Orochimaru. Technically, Hiruzen had asked Orochimaru to withdraw from the race for 4th Hokage, but for the sake of discretion, the clan's internal disgrace remained off the public record. In practice, this meant Orochimaru had to stay on the roster and quietly await the result, even though he no longer had any real chance of winning. Nathan slipped his ballot, marked decisively for Minato, into the box, then let his eyes drift toward Orochimaru. The former candidate's face, already drawn and pale, looked strained and hollow now. In that moment, it was clear that even Orochimaru's famously unflappable demeanor couldn't conceal his disappointment. Nathan's stomach twisted with frustration. This mission had once been his story, his to lead, yet now he was reduced to a bystander, forced to watch while others took charge. Every figure who passed through the courtyard felt like a fresh reminder of his exile. Only Orochimaru remained, bound by Hippo's lingering loyalty to Konoha and his old master-disciple bond with 3rd Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi. Otherwise, he would have vanished long ago. Sensing Nathan's steely gaze, Orochimaru turned his head, those golden, vertical slit eyes flicking over him with cool indifference. Nathan looked away at once, refusing to meet that calculating stare. With the votes tallied, Nathan gave a respectful nod to Hiruzen Sarutobi and the other council members. Then, shoulders squared, and expression calm, he rose and left the chamber without a word.